Attendu que le Canada est fondé sur des principes qui reconnaissent la suprématie de Dieu et la primauté du droit, prenons un moment de réflexion personnelle. Whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law, let us take a moment of personal reflection. Move on to item 4, additions, deletions, or amendments. Councillor Tarnowski.
Yes, if I can just reverse the order in 11A, move it to B, and move B to A, please.
To swap A and B out of number 11. Councillor Associate?
Yeah, I want to announce RAPA for the upcoming event.
Okay, so item B, RAPA. Item C, Councillor Lorrain wanted to discuss local sports. Everybody's okay with swapping A and B in place? Okay. So adoption of the agenda, motion to approve the agenda as modified. Need a mover and a seconder, moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Conseiller Brisson. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Item 6, disclosure of pecuniary interest. Councillor Associate.
I just want to make a statement. I don't have a pecuniary interest, but I am on well and septic.
Okay, merci. Item 7, adoption of minutes. Regular council minutes from March 18th, 2019. Special council minutes from March 25th, 2019. Motion to approve the following minutes as presented. May I mover and a seconder? Moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Councillor Associate. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Item 8, presentations, we have none. 9, delegations, we have none. Item 10, consent items. Motion that all items listed under consent items be received as presented. A, proclamation April 2nd, 2019 as World Autism Day. And item B, minutes of the Limoges Citizens Committee from January 8th, 2019. Need a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Tarnowski, seconded by Conseiller Brisson. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Move on to reports from department and council committees. Report, we're starting with B. So procedure for unserviced areas, report ISWATWW03-2019. The council receives report ISWATWW03-2019 dated April 1st, 2019 and directs the administration to proceed with the current practice for the servicing of unserviced areas. Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Bourgon, Monsieur Godin, if we can get some discussion on this topic.
Merci, Monsieur le maire. Donc, l'administration, on est prêt à rencontrer certains résidents pour apporter les services dans leur région, donc, dont la rue Church à Russell. Donc, avec ce qui est l'avis de motion qui a été discuté quelques semaines passées, ça change notre façon de faire dans le sens que si, tout dépendamment des résidents qui décident de ne pas faire partie du projet, le coût capital de construction change pour les autres résidents. Donc, ça ferait en sorte qu'il faudrait faire de la consultation à plusieurs reprises dans ce cas-là. So therefore, we're asking council to proceed like we've done in the past and meet resident ones with a fixed price with everybody involved or participating in the project. And especially in that case that we have a contribution by a local developer in that specific project of Church Street.
Okay. Question, conseiller Laurent?
Well, I'm gonna ask the question because we passed a resolution recently, a notice of motion on this specific topic. And that stated that anybody who didn't wanna connect didn't have to, based on guiding principles. So might understand now the first opportunity this comes up, that we're going to not act on the guiding principles that were enacted. I mean, I was against the notice of motion to begin with, but now that it's enacted, we're actually, the first opportunity, we're gonna go against it. That's the recommendation I'm hearing, correct?
Monsieur Bourgon?
True, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, Councillor Laurent. And maybe a little something I should add as well, that we did consult those residents of Church Street back in 2016 to proceed with that specific project. So, and they received the cost estimates at that time as well.
So am I to understand, in this case, it's the process portion of it, of how charges would be affected, is that correct?
Yeah, and as well, like otherwise, if we follow the guiding principle, we would meet the resident, here's the amount for 100%. So once we receive the confirmation of how many doesn't want to participate in the project, we would have to go back to the resident. Are you still interested now that your costs of construction are now being increases by X amount of percentage depending on who decides to opt out?
Could the process not include at that first meeting to give a range of residents? For example, if 100% of the residents go ahead, this is your cost. However, if 10%, 20%, 30%, give those ranges as well, and that would, the resident would be able to choose whether they want to move forward. If it, obviously it's preferable for everybody to go ahead 100%, but if it's at 70% and 70% of those residents are still willing to accept it at those costs because there's a cost savings moving forward, could that not be an option when going through that process?
Yeah, yes, it could be an option to add during our consultation as well.
Because it is a new process, obviously, and we have to move forward with that. Question, members of council? Councillor Tonoski?
So the intent of the process was always to put the decision back into the hands of the residents. And so I think that proceeding with the standard practice that we've always used from our end doesn't seem to make sense anymore. Now, I know that in this particular case, if we're talking about a project that was qui a été entamé déjà en 2016, obviously something has to give on that end. But for future processes, I would just say we just need to adapt to make sure that we have a system that works with these guiding principles.
Councillor Associate, then Councillor Larrain.
Do we know how many, do the residents want to, do they have the option to opt in or not? Do we know if some absolutely don't want to hook up?
Monsieur Bourgon?
True, Mr. Mayor. The only information that we have based on when we did our consultation at that time was that it's 33 residents out of 45 are told us yes, they would like to connect to the system. And the remaining 12 didn't answer the survey.
And are the same residents living there?
We don't have that information at this time.
Councillor Larrain?
No, that was gonna be the amount of people. I think the number changed slightly from our discussion this afternoon, but I mean, to me, it makes sense. You put in the pipe in, it's going down the road, people should connect to that pipe. That's what makes sense to me. So I just wanted to point out that the first opportunity came up and we're gonna potentially vote against our resolution that we've already passed, so.
Monsieur Bourgon, the project is my understanding is very far in the process. I believe it's gone to the MOE and all that kind of stuff, correct?
That's correct.
So if we went back to residents and residents decided to not move forward because their costs increased, because their neighbors decided not to go forward, there could be significant impact costs to the township in that case.
Yeah, at this point in time, it would be to the design portion, so the studies, that would be the cost that we have incurred so far.
As well as delaying the project even further, correct?
Exactly, that we had to go back to another option. So yeah, so there would be potential delay at that point as well.
Okay. Conseiller Laurent?
Well, we also have to remember that the costs are, assuming the costs have changed significantly, because we haven't talked to them in 2 years or 3 years. So the costs have now all gone up, for sure. Construction costs go up. And in the next report, you could be adding even more cost onto it. So the 33 people that wanted to go to begin with may not want to go at that point in time. So we are in that same spot. Like, it's almost like it's starting all from fresh, because we don't have the cost, just like what happened with La Madeleine, where we had an initial cost, we had an initial confirmation of who wanted to go, but when the true cost came out, then you've seen a few more people back away. Now, council made I think it was a 60% approval, came in at about 70%, I think it was, that wanted it, the project went ahead. So in this circumstance, you're already at 75% that want to go. I only see that number going down, I don't see it going up. So I think there's significant issues here. And I understand that the proponent wants to go ahead with their project, which makes absolute sense. But in terms of the people wanting to connect, I don't know how much we can rely on the information from 2016 in terms of the amount of residents that want to connect to it.
Conseiller Brisson?
I have two questions. First, in 2016, was there the other project, the only project coming in too, that it would lower the cost of the pipe coming in?
Boy, that's how this whole process started, because the honey development was going
In
ahead. C'est ça, Monsieur Bourdon?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. My other question is, if we meet with the resident and there's not enough that want to go ahead with the project, but the developer want to go ahead, so will he pass just a smaller pipe in?
I think Monsieur Bourgon?
Well, that's how that discussion started, that he would proceed with a force main, so not allowing anybody to connect either now or in the future. So that's why we went and looked at the option of having a gravity sewer for the portion on Church Street to allow people to connect, and even to have for the other residents on Dentrek Bolt to connect in the future if they would like to do so.
Yeah, because it's a significant thing that you don't want to pass through pipe.
Right, eventually, if residents decided not to connect, their costs in the future, if they decided to connect at that time, would be significantly higher than the opportunities present.
Yeah, because they would have the contribution from the local developer in this case.
Plus repaving the street that was just repaved and that kind of thing. Conseiller Laurent?
So we've talked about a couple different things here, but so what you're asking for tonight is to proceed as you've normally proceeded. So the next step is to go out with actual costs. Is that the understanding?
Yeah, that's correct.
And once you have the actual costs in front of them, which could include an additional charge later tonight, what is the magic number of people that say yes or no? From the 42?
45.
45, from the 45 that are affected. What's the regular procedure or the current practice today?
By percentage, we didn't have the specific percentage established in the past. If I take La Madeleine as an example, council asked us to seek at least a 60% of the approval from the resident, so we could establish a percentage, which we currently don't use a specific.
Okay, but you're asking for current practice. So what's the current practice?
That we only go with the majority.
So majority.
Yeah.
So majority is 50 plus 1. So you're asking council tonight to give you authority to go back to the residents and ask for 50 plus 1. Is that correct?
Just for clarification, I think in the past, a report would be brought to council saying how much of a percentage would be willing to participate, and ask for council direction whether we want to move ahead with that percentage or not. Correct?
So yeah, we would come back to council after we met the resident like we did with La Madeleine. And in that specific case, well, we went back to seek a specific percentage.
Okay. Conseiller Tarnowski?
So Councillor Lorraine just brought up a point. So is it, I thought that we were too far along in the process, the way it was explained at the beginning, to now start going through this new way of operating. So in the old process, we could still not do it. Like, we haven't committed to the developer that we were doing this or not, or have we?
We have, Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Bourgon, I believe we have committed, correct?
Yeah, we did, yeah, exactly.
Quel mois, it was December?
I would have to validate, but it was in 2018.
In the fall, we signed an agreement with the developer.
I believe it was in June 2018.
But so c'était déjà un fait accompli qu'on y allait.
Mhm.
Pas le fait que ça soit une plus grosse pipe ou une plus petite pipe, là, comme, non,
Que
ça
c'était que l'entente de la façon que les coûts étaient partagés pour un égout par gravité.
So, this process was already there, so it's not a question of us, now we're trying to backpedal with a new process with something that we've already technically, I guess, would have been approved. So, I don't know, need clarification.
So essentially, the agreement we signed with the developer at this point in time has been confirmed that we're going ahead. Now it's to whether the process for allowing the residents to connect and pay the portion of that contract.
Of the infrastructure.
Of the infrastructure necessary for that contract. Conseiller Larrey?
So two pieces to that then. Has the township committed to the oversizing? And if that's the case, then council has to decide whether or not we are going to pay for it, or if it's going to be shared amongst the 45 residents. Is that what I'm hearing?
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Bourgon?
So we committed the type of infrastructure to be put in the ground. So yes, in the oversizing or by gravity.
Okay.
So yeah, so exactly, that's what the agreement we have with the developer.
That would be the extra cost that the developer would not have had to pay.
That's correct.
So we have already committed to that. So now the decision is whether or not that the taxpayer are paying for that additional and allowing it to go through, and then when people decide to connect, they can connect and pay the cost, or that we're sharing it with the 45 people that will pay for that.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So then, wouldn't tonight be, you're asking for an exemption to the notice of motion that was put through to allow for the forcing of people to be put onto the system? Isn't that what you're asking?
Monsieur Leduc?
Mr. Mayor, members of Council, bonsoir. Yeah, most of the discussion right now have been around the Church Street project. This report here in front of you was more general approach regarding the notice of motion. We have prepared, we wanted to be clearer with council as to what we're looking for tonight. So we have an amendment to our recommendation, which particularly addresses the Church Street project, which is what you're asking, Mr. Lorraine, is we're asking council to consider an exempting the church group from the notice of motion. And also are indicating a percentage rate that we'd like the council to consider if this project will go forward or not. It doesn't mean we negate the agreement with the developer, because we've agreed to that. So that's going to be in the ground no matter what, unless council says no, we'll just pay some penalty fees and some engineering costs. We can do that, but that's not what we're asking tonight. So I asked Mr. Bourgon to be more clear in the recommendation, and we have prepared a revised recommendation. If council would like to see that, or we can certainly put it up on the screen.
I would.
Yeah, put it up on the screen so we can have a look at the revised recommendation.
For church specific.
Yeah. So this will be for church specifically, contrary to the initial report, because I know
Okay.
there was issues regarding the initial recommendation, but I think the administration is looking at this point just to address Church Street more particularly.
Okay, so the recommendation in this case will be in regards to Church Street.
That's what it is there.
Peux-tu l'agrandir un petit peu, s'il vous plaît? The council receives report ISWAT WW 03-2019 dated April 1st, 2019, and directs the administration to proceed with the past practice instead of the new process guidelines recently approved through a notice of motion for the servicing of Church Street between Concession Street and McDonald Road, and to proceed with the project if a majority of 70% of the residents agree with the proposed costs. Okay, Councillor Tarnowski.
I'm just trying to digest that. That tells me that we're still in a position where if we don't have 70%, you wouldn't go ahead with it. So the commitment that we made to the developer is really not there, or is it there?
Monsieur Leduc?
I think it could be seen two ways. I think it could be seen as there, because at one point in time, that area might be needing services. So I think council says, okay, we signed an agreement, what are our costs, and do we still proceed with the oversizing of the piping and the collection system so that it's there whenever council or we get a request from the residents to proceed with connecting? That would be one option. The other option would say, go back to your original design. We have certainly some cost to assume to pay to the developer, and we're stick with a smaller pipe. But I think there will be a good majority of people who are interested in us putting in a larger pipe to collect that area now or in the future.
Okay, just based on that comment, just to make sure. So if we put in the agreement, the reason we put the agreement in place was to allow the serving of Church Street, but not only of Church Street, that will help the system on all the areas, I think there was 3 phases, is that correct?
4 in total.
4 in total?
I'm sorry, yeah, 1, so 3, you're correct.
3 total. So if we just look at the people on Church Street to make this decision, then we're eliminating the possibility for the others if ever we go back to a forceman. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So I'm not necessarily comfortable putting all the decision for those 3 areas all on the residents of Church Street. I would be more comfortable if the township moved forward with, regardless of the percentage at this point in time, because it's proper planning, we put it in place. Hopefully we have a majority of the people that can connect to this system at this point in time. But if we don't, the question now becomes, for the 30% example, do we force them or we don't force them? That's really, at the bottom line, I think that's what the administration is looking for tonight is, are we forcing the 100% of the people to pay? Or are we working something out so that, how to follow the notice of motion that was put in place? Conseiller Buisson and Councillor Lorrain.
Pour commencer, j'ai 2 questions encore. La première question, c'est savoir si, comme que c'était juste le bout qui se fait là, par gravité pour la rue Church, s'il n'y avait pas de développeur, juste avec le coût que ça coûterait, puis là, comparé à qu'est-ce que ça va coûter aux résidents, vu que le développeur est dessus, est-ce qu'il y a une économie ou si le développeur fait juste le coût d'oversizer la pipe ou s'il aide avec les coûts d'ingénieur, de replavage, tout ça?
Monsieur Bourgon.
Merci, Monsieur le maire. Donc, oui, il y a un bénéfice aux résidents. Puis, lors de notre rencontre publique, on va être capable de démontrer aux résidents le coût de l'infrastructure versus avec et sans le développeur pour voir l'impact que ça a à chaque résident.
Mon autre question était, commentaire, montrant que ce développement-là, the development on Church Street affect the developer and affect 2 other areas that we almost have to go, but if the majority of the council want to respect, I would just suggest that we go ahead and we take out the 70%, and the one that want to pay, do pay, and the rest will be assumed by the municipality. I know it will be a larger amount, but since it's already quite on the way and it do affect some other development, I wouldn't say, oh, we don't have 70%, we just pass a small pipe and then all the other one are not allowed to. I think in the view of the municipality, we will pass beside a real good opportunity that even if it bite us a bit more with capitals, it would work for this project, that we do finance the others, and hopefully that the resident will see the impact of that amount that they would save by booking right now. That's my
Okay, merci. Conseiller Lorraine and Councillor Saucier.
So a couple of questions come out of that. When we talk about it servicing 3 areas, is that 3 growth areas, or does it include any additional private service houses?
Monsieur Bourgon.
The 3 areas that we've just mentioned are unserviced area. So the first one being Church Street, the second one then Trek and Bolt, and the third one being a part of Héritage and Trillium.
Okay,
there's
so it's not,
Private service area.
so it's not 45 houses, it's
Larger.
a larger amount of houses. So is the cost going to be reflective on 45 houses, or is it going to be reflective on all of the houses? Understanding that we're not ready to go with the other ones yet, and understanding that we've already signed an agreement to have the proper gravity feed instead of a force main, if I say that correctly, then if we're already assuming the cost one way or the other. So why don't we ensure that we spread it over the right amount of people, forget the 70%, put the people on that want to connect, the other people, when we get to them, then they connect. We're on the hook for the money anyway. So let's do it right. Instead of forcing everyone to do it, and the pipe's gonna go, it's gonna go. I have no problem with that. But we gotta spread it out over the right amount of people. Otherwise, the other ones, if it's 5 years or 10 years down the road, and there's a cost sharing, and those 45 houses that went would then be in a position they'd have to get back money from all of them, I think it's a nightmare.
So, Monsieur Bourgon, I don't think that's the current way it's set up, correct?
True, Mr. Mayor. So the way we did the finance and to be able to present it to all the owners along church, a percentage of the oversize for the other areas will be paid by the developer. So we're using that, so it will benefit everybody. So the people on church will pay for the infrastructure in front of their house, like the other phases will do when we'll extend this, if we extend the sewer in front of their property. So basically, everybody in that area benefits from the developer contributing in the project.
Okay. So, I mean, we're on the hook for it one way or the other. So, I say we go back to them with the proper cost, and whoever wants to connect, connects, and we move forward.
So I think at this point in time, then we're talking essentially about, it's not a matter of percentage, it's a matter that the project is going ahead. The council is stating that fact, and this is where it contradicts to the notice of motion, is instead of the cost being spread out to other residents who want the service, it's the township that carries. So in regards to the notice of motion on this particular item, I have no problems doing that because we're so far along in the process. I think that moving forward, we're not going to find this situation because, we haven't done the work, we haven't entered into contracts at that point in time. Councillor Saucier had a comment, and then back to Councillor Bisson.
Okay, so the bottom statement there, so to proceed with the project if a majority of 70% of the residents agree. So we don't even know that. And I think if we want people to hook up, we have to know the costs. It's still too many unanswered questions. How much are they going to pay? Like Councillor Laurent said, how many residents is it affecting? How much is each person? I mean, there are people putting their houses up for sale right now in the area, so they need to know their costs, and they need to know if they have to pay the, capital charge too, on top of that.
So the discussion right now
I
is.
know
it-
that's coming up
No,
next.
but the discussion we just had essentially would eliminate that last
Yeah,
part, is strike out with the project if a majority of 70% of the residents agree with
but
the proposed.
again, we don't know what the percentage is gonna be.
No, but I'm saying, take out that line. It
Yeah.
will be, and to proceed, that's it, that's all. It moves forward, the township pays the cost. When they have the public meeting, the administration will be able to tell the residents, these are the costs. You wanna connect to this system? This
Okay.
is your cost.
Alright,
And residents will have the choice at that point in time. Am I,
that's what I want.
that's, I think we're clear on that. Conseiller Brisson, then Councillor Tarnowski.
C'est, just know, you did mention that since that project will benefit the two other unserviced area, in the calculation, are those other houses accounted for to help lower the cost? Because it's because of that pipe passing for them that they will be able to service the others, so they will benefit from it.
Je pense que c'est la même question que conseiller Lorrain.
C'est ce que j'ai expliqué à monsieur, au conseiller Lorrain. C'est dans le fond, le tuyau sur Church va être en la bonne profondeur et la bonne grosseur pour prendre la capacité des deux autres phases. Donc, ce coût-là, ben, il va être absorbé par le développeur. Fait que sa portion contribue en partie à ça. Donc, il y a un bénéfice, c'est bénéfique à tout le monde de la région d'avoir le développeur là, qui participe dans le projet.
Councillor Tarnowski, no? Conseiller Lorrain?
So, one last question on it, and it has to do with the percentage, and I understand we're gonna take this percentage away. But is there a percentage that you can identify that would need to be saying yes, only because there's a significant cost to the township, right, when we're putting this in? And if there's only 20% that wanna go, do the costs of saying no and having a developer just go with the force main and we pay whatever penalties that we have, where that offset is to paying the penalties to going ahead with the project? Is there a minimum threshold that we need to put in here instead of a maximum threshold of people? You know, if you understand what I'm saying. So is there a number there that we need to consider?
Monsieur Leduc?
I don't think we've done that, because we were expecting always an answer of at least over 60% or 70% being agreeable to the project. So that never came about. But certainly for us on our side of the table, if there was less than 50%, definitely it would come back to the council to say, hey, there's no take up on this project. So maybe the cost of the penalty is much cheaper than putting
Right.
the pipe in the ground where nobody connects to it in the next 25 years. So there's a financing cost to it too. So for us, we'd come back to council to say there's not enough support for it. So therefore,
Okay,
the
so,
cost. of
but
the-
that'll be part of that report when it comes back to us to decide, right? And I just wanted you to think about that piece of it too, because we're talking about going ahead with it because it makes sense. I agree with it, but we need to also make sure that from the flip side, that it's cost effective for the township to support the additional amounts over time.
The only hick to that is that if we put it all as we're looking as the percentage on Church Street, we're eliminating the choice for the other two areas down the road.
Absolutely.
Right, so we have to, that has to be part of the report as well, stating, you know, if it is low, because we could have 100% participation in the two other areas, but if we base our decisions just solely looking at Church Street, that where it could be complicated.
Yeah.
But definitely we have to have the discussions with the resident of Church to move forward there and see where we go. My understanding is there's quite a few residents that are like, their septic system is at the end of life, they need this to go ahead.
Yeah, and some, their septic already failed a few years ago. So they're currently on holding tanks and waiting for the project to proceed.
Okay, Conseiller Brisson, Councillor Tarnowski?
Fait que là, juste pour clarifier, l'amendement, c'est qu'est-ce que vous avez amené, moins que, mais ça lâcherait à la fin with the project.
C'est ça, on pourrait faire un amendement qui dit if a majority of 70% of residents agree with the proposed cost.
Ben, l'autre, c'était déjà un amendement. Ça, c'était l'amendement qui avait été amené, c'est ça?
Ben, ça, c'est la nouvelle recommandation
Ah, la nouvelle
qui est amenée au
recommandation.
conseil.
Puis de le faire sur le faire un peu.
So but again, you still need to bring a report back to council.
Mhm.
So it should be, and to proceed with the next step in the project. And then at that point in time, it'll come back to council. Councillor Janoski?
Juste une petite question, quand quelqu'un dit oui, je vais me connecter, vous m'avez donné un estimé, is there a commitment there where they have to give a deposit or something like that so they don't renege on it? How does that work?
Monsieur Bourgon?
Dans le passé, les autres projets que nous avons faits, une fois que les résidents nous disent oui, puis on va de l'avant, on apporte un autre rapport au conseil pour mettre en place un bylaw qui dit le frais de combien pour chaque résidence.
Mais est-ce qu'ils peuvent dire, oh, moi je pensais que c'était 1000 piastres de plus.
So in the past, once the next step comes, the bylaw comes to council, council was passing that bylaw, everybody had to connect at the price,
So it was everybody.
at the price to pay. Monsieur Leduc?
That's where the difference between the notice of motion and this one. In our past practices, you could impose, because you were saying, I'm imposing those fees now. So even though you were not renege, I mean, you were still forced by bylaw to connect.
Okay. D'autres questions, commentaires? Ça va être enlevé des consent items. Conseiller Lorrain?
So for the, when it goes to the resolutions, are we gonna be able to see an even updated to this one recommendation? Or are we gonna have to put through an amendment here?
An amendment to
So
this one.
we'll see this one as the original, and we'll have to make the amendment to remove the last sentence?
Okay, everybody's okay? We'll move on to the next item, item A. Capital Charges Bylaw Report FS 15-2019. That council receives report FS 15-2019 dated April 1st, 2019, and the proposed bylaw be adopted as presented in the second, third reading, imposing a capital charge on private wastewater and water system conversions to municipal wastewater system or water system or both. So, I'll ask a question, I think I know the answer, but I just want to try and be as efficient as possible with this file. Is there anybody who's willing to accept what's in place in this report as is? I don't. One, I don't seem to have majority in this case. So I will suggest that we tackle parts of this bylaw, or parts,
Resolution?
the resolution piece by piece. So I suggest we start with wastewater, water, 2011-55, and then the discussion in regards to those who pay a flat fee and are connected to the system. So I think that we'll be able to have a more efficient discussion. So let's start on the wastewater portion. I'm not sure if members of council have questions in regards to the wastewater portion. We've had these reports. I'm not sure if there's new questions that come up because of the wastewater. So it's on item A for the capital charges, but we're just going to look at item specific questions in this report that we've been jumping all over back and forth when this item is discussed. So I just want to look at item by item to make it simpler. So Councillor Tarnowski, then Conseiller Brisson.
First of all, thank you for trying to make it simpler. Before we address them separately, I just want to throw this question out, just for myself for process. So if I count it accurately, I've got about 79 residences that connected without paying capital charges between 15 and 18. So that no matter what we do today is going to come back. And so what do we say around those 79 residences? So, you know, the question of fairness is going to come up and so on. So I just want to throw that out and maybe have a discussion around that, because that's where I'm still stuck. No matter what, there's 79 residences up until 2018, which is just this last few months, 2018, right?
Yep.
So
I'll ask for feedback from the administration. Quickly, in my mind, I think that had this been approved when it was presented in June, there's a lot on the list in 2018 that would actually been paying it. So they haven't paid it because that bylaw wasn't in place at that point in time. Before 2018, I know we had it in a report at one point, the time schedule of all the studies that were done and that kind of stuff. Monsieur Godin?
Oui, merci M. Maire, bonsoir, chambre du conseil. So basically, so if we go back to the presentation that was done on December 17th, we did show a kind of a timeline of the past few years of all the studies that were done. So we did do the water and sewer rate model, and there was some a DC study in 2016, and then later on, growth management plan with the first phase, and then a second phase that was presented in early 2018. And it was with that second phase of the growth management plan that kind of initiated this. It was initiated initially when we did the DC study, but then with the growth management plan, we had more information on hand to be able to look at this question. And so the proposed bylaw followed a couple months later in June, where it was initially presented. That's kind of all I can really say to answer the question of why those others weren't charged and now we would be starting to charge. It's because now we have the information, we've done all these studies and all this research. So now we're trying to kind of correct the pattern.
Councillor Kanowski?
Merci beaucoup. So just as a follow-up to that question then, so in one of the presentations, it talks about a potential legal challenge if we don't charge by the developers. And so have we considered that we would possibly get a legal challenge already because we've known this now since 2016-17? And has there been direction in that?
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godin?
Oui, merci, Councilor Tarnowski. So no, I mean, we haven't had any echo where we're going to be challenged in the upcoming months or anything like that. When we did deliver the growth management plan, I mean, we've acted fast. We prepared a bylaw. Now we've been having discussion with council as well for the last few months leading up to a year. And I mean, the DC study is not due to be renewed before 2021. I don't anticipate there will be any challenges. I think when we did mention potential legal challenges, it was more to challenge the study when it's done in 2021. If we don't include this as part of that, that's where we could potentially expect to have a challenge or not based on speculation.
So essentially you're saying before we did our due diligence, it would be harder to challenge, but once we did our due diligence, that's where if council chose not to charge anything, that's where we might find ourselves in this situation. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I mean, for the DC study, there's an appeal period. So for the study that we delivered in 2016, that appeal period is passed, right? So we can't really, that opportunity has passed. It's once we reopen the study and once we represent the council all the facts and all the calculations and whatnot for the DCs, that's where we could, if we don't act on this, we could expect a challenge.
Okay. Monsieur Tarnowski?
So just a clarification, you mentioned so that as long as we address it by 2021, you said. So as long as we address it by 2021, we should be okay. That we won't get challenged. I'm just.
That's
That's
what
correct?
that's what
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brisson?
It was just to mention that I did mention that I was okay with the report because as I did stated before with all the discussion we had, I'm saying that a unit of water or a unit of sewage, whether it come from a new house that is already charged with development charge or from an older house, a unit is a unit. So that's why for myself I say it should be charged just the same because that's what it was coming from the same unit is a unit, and that's what they did in Casamin and with the nation too. That's just to reiterate my position for this.
Thank you. Clarification in regards to Nation and Casamin. My understanding is that Nation Township essentially doesn't have a DC charge, they simply have a connection charge. And that could have been a route taken by the municipality. We could have said the DC charge is no longer part of the DC package. We simply say it's a connection charge, and regardless if it was new or old, that could have been an option as well, Mr. Godet?
That's correct. So that's why, so they don't have any DCs, but they're, in the bylaw that was an attachment, they have a frontage rate, which is more for the infrastructure that's in front of their property, plus a common charge, which is kind of the equivalent to the DCs for us, but it's applicable regardless if it's growth or if it's a private membership.
It's just that since we had a DC charge in place, it was suggested that we go the route of simply having a different bylaw for this type of scenario. Okay, question, Councilor Associate?
If you go on the previous slide, I was just curious why commercial is charged less than residential. Because I think it works out, if it's 142 for water and 157, that a commercial property of 2,000 square feet, I think you said, would be paying half of what a resident of 1,000 square feet.
Correct. And if it's larger than so many thousand square feet, then they'd be paying considerably more, right?
No, the commercial's paying less than the residential when I worked
No,
in
but per square foot. I mean, your example of 2,000 square feet, but for example, the food land, which is 32,000 square feet, I'm sure they paid a lot more than a residential charge.
And,
No.
yeah, go ahead.
Because it's per square foot they're paying, is that correct, Mr. Leduc, Mr. Godet?
That's correct. So for commercial and industrial, they're paying per square foot. So I don't know what the average area of a typical commercial establishment is, but I don't want to pronounce myself if it's more or less on average than a residential would be.
Well, if I worked it out properly, then it was, the commercial of the same size would be paying half of what a residential,
So for example, at $1.57
yeah,
times 2,000 square feet,
yeah.
$3,140.
Mhm.
But if it's 32,000 square feet, like the food land, they roughly paid $50,000. So I guess it depends on the size of the building.
People do that.
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godet?
Well, we could say the same with regarding the tax rates. We don't, there's different tax classes for different reasons. And a household pays less tax than a commercial tax rate. So you have to make a full equation to consider if they're paying a fair share. So, I mean, there's more factors to consider than just one rate when you compare.
But again, so, okay, say 157 and then 142, so that equals 399 times 2,000 square feet. That works out to 8,000, and that's still less than what the 8,900 capital charge.
Monsieur Godet?
Seems to my council associate. So I just did a calculation real quick. So the break-even point would be 2,700 square feet. So if a commercial is larger than 2,700 square feet, then they would pay more than a residential. And if it's less, then yes, they would pay less.
Conseiller Laurent?
And just to be clear, the tax rate is what, 1.5 to a residential house, and the industrial is 2.8 to a house?
That's correct. So just under 1.5 and just over 2.8 for this.
So,
they do pay more tax.
okay. My turn?
Yep, go ahead.
All right, so I'm gonna talk about water and sewer separately,
Yeah, we're talking wastewater right now.
just wastewater. It just all ties together, that's why. For the wastewater part, I understand if the upgrades to the system were paid for 100% by development, whether it's the lagoons, public safety, whatever it was, that's fine. And the development charges have been taken up on that number of the growth management plan, and we move forward with that. On the sewer side, I can understand, however, I would be more inclined to look at the charge that was presented as different options rather than the 4269, if I'm reading it
Yeah.
correctly, that's up there. And I wanna say that, and I apologize, I left my notes at home, so I'm just going off of what I'm seeing here, but if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 1,058 for Embrum and 1,400 for and Russell, if you go further down in this in the presentation from March 17th, or March 7th, it's in that one. Am I close to the numbers?
You would like to see the two separate amounts?
I would like to, yes,
So you'd like to see one Russell, an amount for Russell and one amount for Ember?
because that's the way it was presented as an option. I mean, if it's not, if we can standardize it, then great. But if we can't standardize it, then I would say no. Like, we have to do that. And the reason being is, there's 654 affected houses, right? That we're talking about. 654 dwellings for sewer. I'm still not sure, and I'm still not comfortable saying 654 people are gonna connect at some point in the next 20 to 50 years. So, how much are they actually going to contribute to the detriment of the system that's in place today? So, for me to say they're gonna contribute completely as another house and impose a 4269, I can't do that. However, do I believe that there should be an amount because the developers did pay 100% of those costs and development will pay? Yes, I do. So, and like I said, I don't think, right from the beginning, I said I don't think everything should be zero. But what is that number? To me, it should be I think it's, Monsieur Bourgon, I don't know if you have the number, but I think it's 1,400 and change for Russell and 1,050 something for Embrun. I mean, we want to standardize it at $1,200, so be it. But that to me is a number that makes more sense than the 4,200. And that was what was presented as an option to us. And I think that I would be more comfortable putting that in than I would be putting in for sanitary, the 4,269. So that will be the amendment that I will make when it comes to the resolutions on sanitary sewer. And if I could make a request that I speak first on the water after, just to continue my thoughts, if that's okay.
Thoughts from the administration on the reducing the 4269? Obviously, we correct me if I'm wrong from the administrative side, but we know that if a unit is given to DC charges, we're collecting 4269. If it's taken up by existing residents, whatever amount we put there, if it's not the same, we'll create a shortfall. Is that correct? Okay. Because, as you mentioned, it was 100% by the developer side, I'm willing, we'll have the discussion on water, I'm flexible on the water side, I'm not necessarily flexible on the sanitary sewer side at this point in time. Conseiller Larin.
My comment on that is, give me a proper number of the 654 that could connect at some point in time. Because I'm not sure that the 654 even does. So I mean, if, there's a difference if we're talking 654 people, if we're talking 50 people. Because how much is 50 people actually going to take up under that system? You know what I mean? Like we've already put through what, 70, 80, 100, 200 over the years into the system that have been absorbed. So over the next 20 to 40 years, as growth happens, upgrades are going to be done at a macro level. So are these, and that's why I don't have it, that's why I can't see us to the 4,200, because I don't know what that number is. If it was told to me today that every one of the people could connect, then I would say, okay, it makes sense, then they should have the 4,269. But I don't know how much is actually going to be put into place, and whether or not that it's going to take up that much space in the current system. So that's why I'm saying I think there should be a fee, and I'm agreeable to the fees that were presented in the report. I just can't be agreeable to that fee without knowing the additional information.
I think for my point of view is, whether it's one or whether it's 600, there's a shortfall. Now, the difference is that whether that shortfall, if 600 people got onto the system all at once, we would have to say, yes, we have to increase this much to cover the shortfall. Whereas if they slowly get onto the system, we'll have to simply increase rates slowly to accommodate for those people as they connect. But there'll always be a shortfall, it'll just be more over time, and you'll just have to increase rates to cover the shortfall as you go along. That's my interpretation, I'm not sure if the administration, if Monsieur Godin, you're the finance guy, so.
No, I mean, that's how we presented it, that's our interpretation as well.
Yeah. So whatever whether one person connects or 10 or 50 or 100, we can't determine that because we don't know, but the shortfall will be created over time, at which point rates will have to increase to cover that shortfall at one point in time.
It's just coming back that whether it's a unit coming from an old house or from a new house, it's the same cost.
Taking the same capacity.
However, we have identified zones in the official plan that aren't going to be serviced, but we haven't discounted those areas. So that's why I'm saying, without saying it's 650 units, I need more concrete information to be able to do it. So right now, and maybe in 2021, it comes back when the DC charges come out, and we look at it again then. But right now, I'm not prepared to do 4269, and that's just me. And I mean, we'll agree to disagree on the shortfall aspect of it. But to me, that's where I stand right now. That's the recommendation or the amendment that I'm going to request when it comes to sanitary if we're going to be breaking it up.
Okay.
I'll look through it and I'll get the right numbers.
Okay. Any more questions on sanitary, Councillor Associate?
Yeah, in the bylaw, it said in section 391, it said capital charges may be imposed to those not receiving immediate benefit. Could that be clarified?
That we've had a lot of discussion over since June on this matter, Monsieur Godin. That's as it's written in the municipal act.
I'm still not clear.
Oui, merci M. Maire, donc Council Associé, yeah, so to answer your question, we're not saying here that township is gonna impose charges on properties that aren't receiving any immediate benefit. What we're doing is we're just citing the sections of the act which allows us to put this charge forward. To be clear, and you'll see this in section, I think it's 3. Section 6 is where you see really where we will be charging the residents, and that's upon connection, or it's the earliest of when we're receiving an application to connect this to the or to the water or sewer services, or if by a law or by regulation the council decides we have an environmental issue, we have to go here, and these people have to connect at that point. That's where they will be charged.
So you're stating that if people opt out and don't connect, they will not pay any charge, service charge,
That's correct.
capital
So
charge.
that's correct. That's for this
Okay.
bylaw here for the capital charges. If they don't connect, they don't pay any charge.
That's what I need to know. Thank you.
Okay. Want to say that?
Just to clarify, I have the numbers here, and it says 1414 for Russell and 1058 for Embrum. However, I'm also willing to have it an equal amount if there's a way to get that number. I don't know how that number was all calculated, and I don't want to actually sit here and do it all. But if you can smooth the number and make it just like the DC charges are smooth, then I would be amenable to a standard fee across those two numbers.
Conseiller Brisson?
Just clarified, how come, I don't know exactly where those numbers are coming, but how come those are numbers and you have the numbers for the DCs? What's the difference with those two?
Monsieur Godin?
Merci, Mr. Maire. Donc, to answer your question, Councilor Brisson, essentially what we've been proposing is the full amount of the DCs. Essentially, that's where our calculation of the shortfall and our calculation of using that same unit would be, right? So essentially, the way I see it, the presentation that was done was to propose to show council different options if you wanted, depending on the options. We've shown different numbers that are justifiable to say, okay, well, to compare what people on the system have been paying and how we could quantify a different number, just to give council options. Essentially, the recommendation is still the full amount, so I would say that if we go with a lower number, if we wanna say something between 1,400 and 1,000, like you said, Councilor Lauren, I would say that we could choose any number. Basically, to us, the magic number is 8,900, but anywhere between 0 and 89 can still be justified. We'll just have to find the revenue for that shortfall through rates or through elsewhere reserves or whatnot. So I would agree with Councilor Lauren to propose a standardized number. What that number specifically is, I mean, it could be the 1,400, it could be 1,058, or it could be between, or more than that.
Okay, Councilor Wilson?
But the way that I thought was that for the DCs, the way that it was for the upcoming costs of the new unit coming in. Where is that the 1414 is coming from? Is that the cost that is right now, that has been, or, because if it's costing.
Here, I have the answer. It's from the March 7th report that council had, and it was laid out in that report. I don't know if you can pull up the March 7th report, or it's got it as alternative options for payment for Russell and alternative options for payment for Embrum. And where the numbers come from is right in there,
Okay, so say so.
right there.
Councilor Tarnowski?
I just want to applaud Councillor Lauren for his due diligence on all this. Really good. I'm a little shocked, Mr. Goulet, that you're saying that, in your words, you just said that we can justify anything from 0 to 8,900. That kind of scares me a little bit. Because, and those are your words, say we can justify, and this was a proposed alternative, and I like the direction that we're going in this, because up until now, I was gonna say no to everything, but when you say that, it can be justified, that's what scares me. Because we're being told that we might be taken to court, so I'm more confused than anything else right now.
Mr. Godet?
Nothing to that. So maybe just to clarify the term that I used to justify, it's not necessarily to justify, but it was another way to look at it where scenarios, where numbers were presented based on what people have been paying in the past, because council did give administration a lot of comments regarding, well, it's not fair because some users hadn't paid this charge, and now we were proposing to start charging, right? And there seemed to be some. I mean, the number seemed to be high, the 8,900. So we came up and we were asked to be creative in finding other solutions. So the numbers that were presented here were still based on information about what people have paid in the past. However, if we come back to the original presentation, if we do charge only 1,400 instead of 4,200, and I think for water it was close to 2,500 instead of 4,600, then the difference between those two still represents a shortfall, and will still have to be recovered through other means, probably like we presented initially through water rates, right? Water and sewer rates, which would be increased not necessarily all at once, but probably moving forward and as those projects become needed. But I mean, we've still been consistent with our recommendation of charging that full amount of 8,900, which really represents what a new construction would have to pay versus a building already existing that wants to have that same service.
So I guess the challenge that we discussed, if we put in this rate and increased rates to cover the difference, then it takes away from the challenge, if you will, because essentially through rates and through this charge, people are still paying the same thing as a DC charge.
Just when you say challenge,
well, if we talked about that the developers paid 100%. So we're talking about potential arguments on their side to say, look, you know, I have to pay so much, and somebody else is only paying this amount, but we're also stating that they're going to have to. We're to cover that shortfall, we have to increase rates.
So the challenge, when I speak of challenge from developers, that would come regarding when we present that project list in the DC study. There's always that column that says benefit to existing. We have to put that number there now that we have all the information in hand. Which means, so basically, the developers wouldn't challenge how much we're charging for project conversions, but they would challenge how much is being included in the DCs versus the benefit to existing. Right. So by identifying a portion to benefit the existing, we have to fund that elsewhere, which would be from this reserve fund that would be created from the rates here, plus rates increase if we don't go collect the full amount.
Okay. Conseil Larry?
And again, that's only assuming anybody connects. Otherwise, there's no shortfall, right?
Correct.
Correct, so I mean, when we do the 2021 DCs, we'll have to have that assumption, right, what that number is, that we're really, considering that these projects are gonna go forward, right? So when we have each of those pockets in the different areas of the township, knowing that 200 units there are gonna convert to sewage, then that would be used to calculate the ratio that's benefit to existing versus the growth part.
So, if, say, by 2021, 200 homes connected at a reduced rate, that amount will be short in that amount that we've been collecting, correct?
Yeah, so we wouldn't have collected DCs on those, but it's also looking forward to what other projects are gonna come after 2021.
Conseil Larry?
Yeah, the one thing that we also have to keep in mind is that the residents that live in those houses did pay for water and sewer. They paid for their well, they paid for their septic. So they did pay something. We can't lose sight of that fact. So to say that they're not paying anything or they never paid anything, they did, they paid for their own. Now they're getting into the system because either their systems are failing or we're forcing them to, or whatever the case is. So there was a cost. So to me, that's another justification to me of saying, okay, well, yeah, they should pay into it, I agree. And at the cost that others have paid over time, maybe that's the right cost, rather than the 4,200. And then when we come back in 2021, we take a look at it, you may have better numbers at that point in time of who actually can connect, and not even who wants to connect, but who actually can connect, based on OPE, based on, speaking to residents, based on, many different factors. And maybe at that point, we have to make a different decision. But when you're asking me tonight to do it, that's gonna be my recommendation.
Councilor Associate?
And just to add to that, they also had to pay for the maintenance of their septic system, so having it pumped out regularly, it's not cheap. It's, you're looking at sometimes close to $500 every 3 years, so that's, but I still feel a lot of people are feeling, and this is what I'm hearing, that they're paying for development. So the little homeowner, the retiree, the person that's living on a fixed income is paying for Russell Township getting bigger. And they feel why.
Well,
Because the developers are getting richer, they're building lots of houses. I mean, no disrespect, sir, but it's they can afford this. They're building, and they got lots of houses. And I just think that I'm saying the elephant in the room. A lot of people are feeling that.
well, feeling something in reality don't necessarily mean the same thing.
Well, it is reality.
In this case, we're talking about growth paying for growth, is that correct, Mr. Gaudet?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor, and I just want to emphasize too, we're not in a position to tell council what's fair and who should be paying for what, right? But that question, that what Mr. Mayor just said, growth pays for growth, that's the point here, is that when we do the DC study, we can only put in the project list what's for growth. So if there's a portion of a project that's gonna benefit someone other than new development, then we can't charge the developers for that.
You can't?
You can't. Conseil Larry?
Yeah, I mean, obviously this discussion's going on, we still got the water, we still got the rest of this discussion. Can I ask two things? Can I ask that because this report and the report that we did was B, can I ask that at the end of this discussion, that we suspend the rules of procedure, we allow for public questions if there are any, and then pass those two resolutions or discuss those two resolutions immediately?
Yeah.
Is Is that doable? Just because I know most people in the room are here for that, and to wait till the end of the meeting, I think is a little unreasonable on our part.
Yeah, Councilor Lorraine is asking, do I have a seconder?
Yes.
All those in favor? Yep, we have majority, so
Okay.
we're good for that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Who's the seconder?
Mr. Fennis. So are we done with wastewater? At this point in time, y a-t-il quelque chose du côté de l'administration pour ajouter in regards to wastewater? We're good? Let's move on to the water. Conseiller Lorraine.
All right. So, on the water, we're talking 254 potentials. Again, how many are realistic? I don't know. What I do know is that in I'm gonna say 2014, but I don't know the exact time frame, we increased the units by 4,100 by doing hydrotechnical calculations, which we continue to do. They're ongoing, and they may fluctuate from 100 here, 100 there over time. But we added 4,100 units to the system to growth, right? So with development in those 4,100 units, they're going to have to increase the capacities in whether it be the lagoon, not the lagoons, the reservoir and whatnot. So infrastructure is going to have to be developed over time. We pumped in 4,100 more units. Let's round it up at 3,500 with the fluctuations. To me, there's probably only 50 out of the 200 that are 250 that are going to actually be able to connect over a 20-year period. So for me, the absorption of those 50 units makes sense. So I don't see why we would charge, from a water perspective, any additional cost to the residents who are going to connect, other than the cost of them getting onto the system and paying their fees, like every other resident that joins in from a growth perspective will pay their part of the cost of the infrastructure as they get on. So if they get on in year 15, then they have another 15 years to pay. If they get on in year 25 of the 30, what I'm talking about is the 30-year loan that we have to pay off the infrastructure debt. And that's what the flat fee, that's part of what the flat fee is based on, is the term of that debt. So as people get on, we know that X amount of units of growth per year is supposed to pay that down. And as these extra units get put on, it's going to pay it down a little bit quicker if there are more that connect to the system. So to me, it makes sense that those units can be absorbed. Because I don't think there's going to be a lot of them that are going to be able, when you look at where the residents are that could potentially connect, I think some of them are outside or are in those zones that we've identified in the OP that are unserviceable. So if that's the case, and we're talking over a huge span, we've allowed developers to collect another, double the amounts of units in our system for the amount of units that they're going to take up here and there. I don't think there should be a cost associated with it. If council decided they want to put a cost in, then I would refer them back to this chart and suggest that we smooth out a rate. Well, it's the same rate, it's 1106. So to me, that's the maximum cost that I would consider putting forth, which is just getting everyone up to speed on what everyone else has paid. But I would, the motion I'm gonna make with the water and sewer is 0. And if I don't get 0, then I'm gonna go for 1106.
Okay.
So that's my justification on it.
So my question in that regards is, we have a fee in place, 2011-55, for water in the village in Russell, that people have, existing homeowners have paid that charge, which I believe is $39.65. So because we're talking water, so part of the suggestion of the administration was to repeal that one if we went with the new charge. Are you going to be suggesting that we repeal this one as well? Because we already have it in place and people have already paid that fee in the past.
I just want to make sure I understand that one correctly. Wasn't that for a specific project? Or was that everyone in general? Because we didn't impose it on certain projects.
We
right?
didn't impose it in Emblem For water, Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Bourgon, it was applied to those connecting to the water system in the village of Russell and Marionville. Anybody who anybody since 2011 who's connected to the water system in the village of Russell and Marionville has paid that fee. There hasn't been many. There's only 5 or 6 people actually connected to the water system, but those individuals did pay those fees. So I just want a clarification. If we're putting another fee in place, are you determining that, because these two are definitely tied together?
So this is already a capital charges bylaw is what you're telling me, that was imposed, is that,
Monsieur
just it
Leduc,
was never called that?
Mr. Godin, clarification?
Yeah, that's correct, essentially. It's a bylaw that resembles a lot of what we're proposing here, but except that it wasn't for the whole township, it was for a specific portion of the village, or it was specific to Russell. So essentially by bringing this forward for the whole township, it just made sense to repeal that one.
So this was for all of Russell and all of Marionville?
Monsieur Leduc?
Since that bylaw was passed, there were new proposals and new areas being developed. But for those who were there initially, who were suspected to be developed, they were included. But some portions, for example, when we went behind Forest Road, that wasn't there in our initial discussions when we set that rate. So that's why this area was not subject to that fee. Because there was a list of areas in the bylaw that says if you're living in that area, then you're subject to this fee. So it was quite specific. So that's why Forest was not on that list. That's what we didn't charge them for.
So the recommendation on the capital charges is to repeal this anyway. So if you're asking me if I'm going to request to repeal it, the answer will be yes. I would request to repeal it.
Just to be clear, the recommendation is to repeal it if we're putting the full amount, the new capital charges in place.
Oh, I fully understand that.
Yeah, so just to be clear, the administrative point of view, if we're not putting the full amount in place, do you still recommend to remove this item?
To me, this looks site specific.
Yeah.
It was for Castor Street.
And
It wasn't for the entire,
benefiting areas?
because I see Castor Street water main is what I see. Am I missing something?
Mr. Leduc?
So I think there were the ED road sections also that could be connected. And others in similar areas.
But they're not identified in the bylaw.
I think they are. There's a list.
Within the benefiting area, so I guess it's to clear what the benefiting area is.
I have land use classification, this was in the report, bylaw 2011-55.
Yeah.
And the last page says land use classification and corresponding rates. Service, Castor Street water main, singles and semis, $39.65. I'm
Yes.
assuming that's the amount you're talking about.
That's correct. But that's for the Castor water main, Mr. Leduc?
In the bylaw itself, there's a definition section.
Okay,
And that definition section says about benefiting area. So it means the lands within the villages of Russell and Marionville together with all lands located along the water distribution system serving the villages of Russell and Marionville. So it was specific enough in the bylaw.
Yeah, because if the Castor water main wasn't put in place, the whole system, everybody benefited because that was put into place. Is that correct?
so my answer is still, yes, I understand that, exactly what I'm asking, which would be to repeal and replace with the new one, regardless of what the new outcome is.
At this amount that you're suggesting, the 11 or
Right.
okay. Other questions, comments, Councilor Associate?
If I can jump ahead to section H, for Schedule H. The fourth paragraph down on here says that in this bylaw, 55/2011, excuse me, says that whereas pursuant to Ontario Regulation 58406, a municipality does not have the power to impose fees or charges to obtain revenue to pay capital costs or services to which development charges apply. So, yeah, so we don't have the right to charge fees. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Godin, clarification, please.
Oui, Monsieur Sumar, Council Associé. So essentially, so that's what we're saying, that the charge that we're proposing is to fund that benefit the existing users portion of the lease estate. So that portion wouldn't be considered capital costs for services to which development charges.
So it's not for paying the growth portion, it's paying for the benefiting users portion.
I just want clarification.
Okay. D'autres questions, commentaires? Quelque chose à ajouter de l'administration? Okay, so,
So now we want another section?
well, the next one was 2011-55. You stated that you want to
Oh.
repeal it.
Okay. And what is the rest that we have to deal with? Is it existing non-connected users? Are we talking about them as well?
Yes,
Okay,
that was the fourth.
then I'll wait. Okay, thank you.
So in regards to 2011-55, that determines in the village of Russell and Marionville that there's currently a charge in place, that some residents have paid for that who've connected from private to the public system. So do we want to repeal that bylaw? I guess it ties into the water. I'll say it for me, if we're not looking at putting something in place for township-wide for the water, I don't necessarily, one of the arguments we've heard is, why should we pay when others haven't? But in this case, there have been people who have paid this amount. So they paid $3,900 for water. So, I would be fine going down to $3,900, the amount that's currently in place. But I don't necessarily want to lower that further, my point of view. So, Councilor Ryan said he'd bring an amendment, but go ahead.
Well, the question becomes was the 3,900, figure strictly coming from the Castor water main project? Like, where does that number come from? So I don't know how we get to that number over on Heritage or Church Street or Bowles or Dentrex. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just trying to understand where that number would have come from. And, again, for me, I'm asking to repeal that one and replace with the cost that we're gonna put into place. But if we're talking just the 3,900 and you put that amendment through and it goes through, I'd like to know where that 3,900 comes from, because if we're talking everybody, then I don't think that was the intention of that. It seems as though it was the intention for the force main.
C'est ça. Well, Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godin, perhaps some clarification.
Or there were a few components of the system that were considered in tallying the total cost, and divided by the number of residents being subject to. That's how we came up with this formula.
So were the areas that we're discussing now, were they part of that calculation? The original calculation? Do we know?
That's a good question.
Yes.
I would
Because
think they were. I would think they were. We need to confirm that, but I would believe they would have been included.
Right, because if they weren't included and then all of a sudden we were adding all these numbers, then obviously that cost would decrease. So that's something we can look into. I see Madame Tremblay is looking at her laptop trying to find that information. So further questions on that one? I think we've had enough discussion. We'll move on to the next one. The next one is in regards to the fee that some residents are currently paying. They have the pipe running in front of their property. They've paid their share of the infrastructure costs, but they haven't connected to the system. Just to clarify, what's recommended in the report is for those individuals who are currently paying that fee to not charge them in the future. Is that correct, Mr. Godin?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. So that would be in the bylaw that we're recommending. It would be section 10.2 and 10.3. And we've also included Schedule J, which is a identification of a few scenarios where we've had some discussions, but we haven't had a clear direction or a clear desire from council as to what we want. So that was a scenario where those group of residents, of properties, we see them individually, okay, well, how do we treat those properties? And the way the bylaw has been prepared and proposed is that this new capital charge be applied to the upcoming servicing projects, so all the future projects. So if the, for example, the commercial park, I'm not sure if everyone's connected or not yet, but I mean, even if they would not be connected to the services, if they would come in for a connection permit tomorrow, if this would be adopted tonight and they would come in for a connection permit tomorrow, they wouldn't be subject to that fee. It would be only for future projects. So for instance, so if we follow the last report, well, Church Street would most likely be the first one for this.
So, I'll give my 2 cents worth. I have a little bit of difficulty just waiving it completely, because we have some residents who have been paying it for quite some time, and then we have some residents who start this year, for example. So, is it fair to say we waive it for everybody? We talk about putting fees in place. I could see us crediting those fees towards whatever council decides. That way it's fair for everybody, where somebody who's put $2,000-3,000 in fees over the years towards the capital charge versus somebody who's put $200 in towards the capital charge. I could see a credit off of what council will decide, but I'm not sure if I want to completely waive it. My suggestion. Want to say, Eli?
Yeah, so I think I'm on similar ground on that. I think there's 2 separate things. There's the people who are currently paying today that could connect but don't. And then tomorrow, there are others that will get a pipe in front of their house. Let's assume it's Church Street and 15 people don't want to connect, and those 15 people have the pipe going in front of their house. To me, everyone who's already paying, I think, should continue to pay and are exempt from whatever we pass here tonight in terms of capital charges for water, if that's what they're being exempted from, if that's what they're being charged for today. Because they are paying their infrastructure costs. They are paying that amount into the system. They're repaying the debt that we have. They're paying the maintenance. They've paid the capital cost to get it in front of their house. So to me, they're done everything we've asked of them, except actually taking up the unit. So for me, they're doing what they should be doing, just like any other house would. Going forward, well, those people who connect at some point in time, well, they're going to end up paying whatever we impose today, which, whether it's the $8,900 or whether it's the reduced amount of, I'll say $1,236 because I equalized it out. Say it's $1,236. They will have paid, and I'm sure it'll go up because over time that number is, how do we say that? It's escalating or whatever, it's compounding or whatever. So that number is fluctuating over time, right? Or indexing, I think the word is. So it'll index over time. So they're going to catch up to that number when they do, with the people that are paying it. So for them, I think they pay the capital charge that gets imposed. Everybody else just keeps maintaining what they've been paying because they're paying into the system. Because I would hate to see someone who's paid $3,000 into the system, we say, no, you don't pay anymore. They go decide to connect in 2 years, or the new resident goes in and connects in 2 years and then gets hit with the capital charge. To me, that's not fair. That's not right. So I don't know if we were saying the same things or not, but
no, I'm essentially saying that the $3,000 they paid would come off the capital charge.
That's it.
Because the scenario you're saying, if somebody started paying this year, why are they getting the same advantages as somebody who's been paying for the last 5 or 10 years?
because they just started paying.
Yeah, but a capital charge, we'll say it's $4,000, $4,200. So the person who paid 1 year paid $200 is getting a $4,000 savings, whereas somebody who's been paying, paid $4,000 is only getting a $200 savings.
Okay. We're gonna look at it differently, and we'll make our amendments when it comes to it, but to me, the people who are paying it as of the date that this gets passed, the people that are paying it are exempt from capital charges if and when they ever connect, because there are some people that may never connect,
Right.
that are paying that fee. So if they wanna connect, then they go ahead, they pay the cost to connect it, but they don't pay the capital charge, cause they've been paying into the system. Whether it's been for 1 year or 5 years, the fact is they paid their maintenance. They've done everything that we've asked of them. On a going forward basis, anyone that gets a pipe put in front of their house going forward would be subject to any capital charge.
But not pay the month,
But not, no, they wouldn't pay that monthly maintenance fee, or the quarterly,
yeah,
what's it called, flat fee. They wouldn't pay that flat fee going forward. That would be recouped when they get the capital charge.
they would pay the capital charge.
They would pay the capital charge
Okay. And
of
then-
whatever that amount is, whether it's the requested amount, the amount that we decide on today, whatever that number is.
Right, so we could find ourselves in a scenario where somebody doesn't connect, they pay for a year or two, they pay the capital charge. The capital charge could be less than somebody who's paying a maintenance into the system for the last 5-10 years. We could find ourselves in that situation.
Yeah, it's possible.
Okay.
That was the system that was in place, so.
Conseiller Brisson, Councillor Tomasky.
Like for myself, I would prefer the way that Pierre was saying, that if we begin imposing capital charge, we stop for everybody the flat fee, and the one, if they had paid $200, they have, whenever they connect, then they're deducted that amount from their, not the development, the
Connection fee.
connection fee. Whether, so it's fair if they've been paying for 10 years and they've paid $3,000, so most of it is paid because with the credit, and it's easy for the municipality to keep in track, okay, that person has been paying that amount, and whenever they connect, but from day one, everybody is not paying flat fee anymore because there's the development charge going.
The connection fee.
Connection fee on. That's what I prefer for myself.
Okay, Councillor Tomasky?
Yeah, I'd just like to agree with Councillor Brisson. So the idea, if we're going with the 1236 as a fee, that means that, you know, the people from 2010 to 2018 have roughly paid almost $1,000 into that. So if we stop now, it's just a credit that would go eventually when they connect, as opposed to keep charging them, because at some point very soon they'll be over the 1236 threshold. So I don't see an argument for continuing to charge that if they're never going to connect.
Councillor Laurent?
The way that I can be comfortable with that is if we turned around and said, we're refunding that amount to people. And then they pay the full amount of whatever capital charge if and when they ever do connect. And the reason I say that is because if we say somebody's paid $2,000 or $3,000 into the system, and then they move. The next person coming in says, I want to connect to the system, and we say, oh great, you have a credit of $2,000 that they never paid into the system. It was the old resident that paid that money. So it's not like they can get that back in the sale price of their house, that there's a potential savings there. So I mean, if we're gonna say we're gonna credit back these people, then I think we need to go the further step and credit back the people, and whether that's for how we offset it, I don't know what to do, but I don't know if administration wants to sit there and keep track of what everyone's amounts are and the credits if they ever connect going forward, and then have to pay back the original people that actually paid it when they move, and you know, we get back into that whole scenario, and I don't think it's right for somebody else that comes in and buys the house to get the credit for the stuff that the previous homeowner did. Like we get back to those guiding principles that we talked about, and when one person goes and the others don't, and they sell the house, and who gets the benefit of that money? The homeowner that buys the house and wants to connect? I don't know, I don't see that as right. So if that's how we wanna go about it and say we stop everyone being charged as of that date, then to me it's, you gotta refund people back. And you'll charge them when they connect going forward. That's the only way I see it as fair.
Conseiller Brisson, then Councillor Canasta.
Just a question, like, for Mr. Godin. You were saying that there was some that we're paying right now, the flat fee, there was 32, I think that it was mentioned. What's the amount of money that has been accumulated from those 32 with it years?
Monsieur Godin?
Oui, merci, M. Maire, Councilor Brisson. So I don't have that number in front of me right now, but I think I do remember that we had that for one of the presentations, or we might have prepared that table in case it was asked, so I can look into that. But I can look into that to see if we have that specific.
Yeah, because I can understand the point, because what I'm saying is just that, to be fair, we should stop whether, it's just that if we pay everybody right away, it might put a bit of cash tight, put it.
Well, we'll see the impact of what a refund.
Yeah, that's it, but I
It's
do.
in reserve.
Yeah, okay. But-
It's gotta be in reserve, right?
No, I have no problem too with the way of
Yeah.
saying that instead of paying part of it, if we decide that we have the connection fee, we pay them back what they had paid for flat fee, because technically now it's with the connection fee that they pay. For myself, I have no problem with repaying too.
Okay, Councillor Tarnowski?
So I just want to confirm, you have a number of 32 houses that are paying the flat fee? That's it, a total of 32?
We'll verify the information.
Yeah, because on the slides from the previous presentation, it talked about the amount. I didn't see the number, but it was $897 between 2010 and 2017, and 17-18 was $70. So if it's only 32 homes, that's not a big deal. But if it is a major impact, that would have to change. So if we can get further information, and just an add-on, just again from a procedural point of view. So we have three kind of separate elements here that we're gonna. That we're gonna vote separately on, is that correct?
Well, as we'll go through, once it's on the table, amendments can be put forward. And I would suggest that we start with as the same order we did wastewater, water, 2011-55, and we'll go through amendments as we go through.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this one? So these are the four elements. We will allow a question period. I'm gonna ask council, we're okay for a 10-minute break? Perfect, because my jug of water is empty, so I wanna take care of that. And we'll be back in 10 minutes, and we'll open the floor for questions from the public. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. So earlier we suspended the rules of procedure, and we'll open the floor up to questions from members of the public. If you have a question in regards to items A or B on the agenda, I'll ask you to come to the lectern and state your name and address, please, and your question.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Charles Anthony, Castle Street, Number. Two questions just to get me in, three questions actually to get me going. The actual charges for Church Street and the estimated charges. They were estimated charges, I gather, in 2016.
For infrastructure costs?
For infrastructure costs, and you actually have a cost now. What are they per residence? Do you know?
Monsieur Bourgon, the estimated cost back then?
I just don't have the information right in front of me, but certainly something that we can provide the two estimates when we meet the residents.
Okay.
To show the difference.
Show the difference then and now.
And we've been asked in the past as well to prepare a fact sheet. So it's all things that will be given to residents in a moment, and we do our public.
When you do your public presentation to those residents.
The next question on that is, reading through the Municipal Act, Section 400, which puts limitations on Section 391 and imposing fees and charges. Does the regulation that comes out of that Regulation 58606, local improvement charges and priority lien status, does that apply to the actual installation of the water and wastewater services?
Monsieur Bourdon, I believe in the last presentation it was discussed why we weren't going the local improvement route, but maybe you can.
Yeah, we've discussed in the previous, I can't remember if it was the one in December or in March.
It was the last presentation.
But we, again, I would have to go back to find why, like the reasoning why we're not using the Local Improvement Act.
The local improvement, there's no local
or-
improvement act, that was
That's
repealed
section.
I meant
16 years ago.
That section in
section,
the
yeah.
municipal act.
But the draft bylaw and everything is always referred to section 391,
That's correct.
fees and charges. This is a limitation on imposing fees and charges when you make a local improvement as defined in the regulation. That's why I'm asking, does this regulation apply?
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Bourdon. This bylaw was revised by our legal department, or
I don't believe that our legal advisor has raised this issue with us, so we can have a look at it if there's an issue there.
Okay.
What section was that about?
this is 586.06.
Yeah, the limitation is in section 400, bracket B. And the regulation is 586/06.
Thank you.
The next thing, in all of this, nobody has mentioned La Madeleine Boulevard. Will they be paying a capital charge if this bylaw goes through?
So that was when La Madeleine project went forward. Council at that point in time made the decision that no capital charges would be applied to them.
Is that in a bylaw?
That was actually indicated, I believe, at that meeting.
But it's not a bylaw.
C'est-tu inclus dans le bylaw, Monsieur Godin?
It is in this current bylaw, where La Madeleine is not mentioned currently, but in section 10.2 and 10.3, there is an exemption for any project that's undergoing or that's completed.
It's already-
Look at the actual.
I've read 10.2, 10.3, and it says where services exist. Let me just bring it up again, and I'll read the section here.
So are you referencing to the people who haven't connected? I guess my question is, because La Madeleine, the project has gone forward.
It's not finished. They don't have services yet.
Yeah,
That's
but
the question.
during our public meeting and during that discussion, council gave direction that they would not be paying a future capital charge, if I remember well. Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godin, that was correct?
To my recollection, what you're saying is correct. In the actual bylaw, sorry, I referenced 10.2 and 10.3, that's not correct, because it only exempts areas where services are actually there currently and that they're paying flat fees. In the recommendation, in the attachments to the report, we do mention that scenario, and we do mention that they're exempt, but I think it would be good to maybe word it clearer in the bylaw as well to match that.
Sure. I'll say that.
I was just gonna say that I assume that either we have already or we will have to put in place a bylaw to charge them costs
Yeah.
to La Madeleine specifically, and because they've already seen what their cost was going to be, and that's why they gave a 70% approval on the cost, with the understanding that council had exempted them, so I don't see how we would be able to go back.
I'm not asking you to go back and
Okay.
charge them at that. I'm just coming up with,
It sounded like you were asking us to charge them.
no, I'm not asking
So-
you to charge them. What I'm now looking at is the fairness, because now La Madeleine is not gonna be paying, they have not yet got services. You're gonna put this bylaw in place, and then if I come up and connect sometime in the future, I will be paying a capital charge, and you're also saying that I will be contributing, but through the rates or some other means, to them not paying the capital
So
charge.
the reason that council made the decision at that point in time for La Madeleine is because the process had already started before the whole discussion on a connection fee charge. That is why. But again, if we don't put anything in place now, that argument will stand the test of time. 5 years down the road, oh, well, you didn't charge the people before.
Well,
10 years down the road. So are we supposed to, as a council, decide that we're never charging anybody going forward? Because some people have
That's an
not
option.
paid. That's an option, but that's up to the council to make the decision. Thank you.
Jim Feely, 109 George Street in Russell. If I can continue on that thought, I totally agree with you. It's the fairness of the whole thing, and that's what I've been trying to talk about for several months in several meetings here. My first point is that,
Question, please.
understood, but just to kind of capture around a little bit my thoughts. I totally understand and agree with the reasoning and from administration and from council's perspective on DC charges. As I've said and repeat, I'm looking for fairness as you are treating the Madeleine people fair. I'm asking for the people that have their own wells and sewer systems, have been here since umpteen years, I won't get into specifics, and the 71 people that have hooked up since 2011 have not paid. So I'm looking for a simple crystallization of the environment. Council decide what to do going forward and treat the people that are on the books fairly. That's not too much to ask, I don't think. To the 2011 55, just to clarify, in my reading of it, it was to address a very specific issue. There was money to be collected, set aside, collected just on, and that, I don't know if that's been done. From what I saw tonight, I doubt it. Because I don't think anybody knew what really is going on with that bylaw. So if I asked how much is in the kitty today, I think I would get some blank stares. So
your question?
my point is, it's a repeat of basically what I've said before. Please, as I've said before, crystallize, go ahead, do this. I think the developers want it, you want it, everybody wants it, in terms of you, in terms of township, administration wants it, do it, by all means. But consider, as one Councilor Loren brought up, there has been costs incurred, consider that by people. Okay, thank you.
Harry Baker, Forest Road, Russell. I have a question on Schedule C, the second page of Schedule C, under capital cost per units for various projects based by location. And so my question is, so for instance, for the Corbin Alley subdivision and Forest Road, the estimated capital cost per unit is $36,000 to $40,000. My question is, are those Class D or Class C quotes? Where are these estimates coming from? And in the past, in the end, when we get into the Class B, we found out that these are, maybe a third or 3 times or 10 times more in the end. So where are these numbers
So
from?
these, if I remember well, Mr. Bourgon, they're from the growth management plan done in 2016?
16 years.
So these were the costs associated in growth management plan of 2016.
So,
And they were what level class?
Class D estimates.
Class D estimates.
Class B, okay.
D.
Class D.
D.
Okay. Which is an order of magnitude, could be an order of magnitude difference, the final one. Okay. I just want to be sure because it's a good selling point. It doesn't seem to be too bad. But if we look at La Madeleine, they started out at 12,000 and ended up at what, 45, 43, something like that?
Oh, there was definitely a jump from one year to the next,
Yes.
and I would anticipate that most of these projects would be in the same boat.
Exactly. So these are just, take these as a grain of salt.
Yep. Thank you.
Hi, Jane Skunas, 5 Bowles, Russell. I had 2 questions. One, just so it's clear in my head, DC charge is, in Nation, it's a hookup charge, but here, Russell, it's a DC charge? Is that equate
Yes.
the hookup charge?
So a development charge
Yeah.
is what new constructions pay,
Right.
okay? And there's a portion of that is for water and sewer.
Okay.
Nation have, I believe, development charges as well, but they didn't include their water and sewer portion under that charge. What they've done is they've just put a connection fee bylaw in place, and whether you're a new connection, a new construction, an old house, it doesn't matter, whoever connects to the system pays the same thing. I believe that's the same thing in Castleman. There's multiple residents do it.
Okay, so that's basically we're talking safety.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the other question I have is that at this point in time, my understanding is there's a bylaw, there's a notice of understanding or something that indicates that if the services go by, I do not need to hook up. Correct?
So currently, we've put a notice motion that
Yes.
was approved by
Okay.
council
Right.
as guiding principles
Okay.
that state if the pipe is going in front of your place,
Mhm.
the township will not force you to pay infrastructure costs if you don't want to. That hasn't been necessarily always the case.
Mhm.
For example, La Madeleine Street, 70% of the people wanted it.
Mhm.
Council went ahead and 100% of the people have to pay that cost.
Okay.
So that's essentially the Cliff's Notes of it.
Okay.
But if right now, what we've put in place, approved by council, is that if the infrastructure is going by your house and you don't wanna connect to the system, you would not have to pay those infrastructure costs.
So okay, so when Church Street goes by, big pipe goes through,
Yes.
at this point, until township's gonna pay for that, that process will happen, subdivision will go through. Then the next phase would be potentially Bulls and Drentex.
Right.
So my wonder is, what guarantee do I as a Bull Street resident have at this point in time that once it comes down my street, township says, oh, we have to pay for this oversized pipe, now Bulls, Drentex, and all the other people that have to connect will pay to offset the township's cost to them. Does that make sense?
I'm trying to follow.
So basically, you're gonna.
What you're saying is because we're going to carry the cost on
Yeah.
Church Street, are we going to charge you more down the road for?
Yes.
I don't think that's the will of council or the direction we're given.
Okay.
The costs associated with Bowl Drentex would be the actual costs associated with doing that project.
Okay, so we're not gonna pay for that oversized pipe, that's something that the township's gonna, to facilitate all of us being able to hook up.
So that was part, Mr. Bourgon, correct me if I'm wrong, part of the, as you mentioned, the developer is paying a portion, that comes out of the savings, is that correct?
That's correct. The developer will offset, if I can say, that cost of oversizing for the other phases. So that way, all those 3 phases will benefit.
So there's a savings, because the developer is going ahead,
Mhm.
all this work can be, everybody's getting a share of the pie, if you will, or getting some savings on what would have been. If the developer never went ahead and
Mhm.
all these areas decided they wanted to go ahead,
Mhm.
the cost would be considerably higher.
Okay.
And there's a savings there because the developer is going ahead.
Thank you.
Considerare?
Fully understand all of that and the will of council today. However, you're not gonna like what I'm gonna say. The Municipal Act still gives council the ability
Yes.
to force anybody and everybody who is not connected to connect at any time. So that is always in the background. However, there's been a guiding principle that came in, there a notice of motion that was put in with guiding principles that are suggesting that council would not impose that. And I think as council rolls over, I think the intention would still be the same. However, at the end of the day, there is still that ability. Sorry, I just had.
Yeah, no, and to be clear as well, that pretty much applies to any bylaw the township puts in place. Any council can come in and redo everything if they wanted to. But at least by putting this forward, we kind of set the pace going forward, that if a future council needs to know what the impact of their decisions are, because we've put this in place.
So this council, until next election, are following that guiding principle?
So the guiding principle is in place. It doesn't mean council has to follow it, but I can tell you from my perspective, there's a reason we brought it forward, and that's why I voted in favor.
Okay.
Yes. Hi, I'm Kathy McHugh from Edie Road. Just picking up on what this lady said and what has just been talked about. Guiding principle, notice of motion. Will the wording that people who do not hook up do not have to pay this capital charge, will that be in the actual bylaw?
I believe it is, Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godin. It specifies this only applies to people who connect to the system.
That's correct.
In regards to capital charges.
In the bylaw itself,
In the
actual
bylaw,
wording to that
but
effect.
let's just be clear though, capital charges is the 4,200 or 8,900 we're talking
Mhm.
about. There's no reference to infrastructure costs in this bylaw.
Yeah.
I just wanna be clear,
Yeah,
but yeah, no,
yeah.
this specifically says, this is for people who decide to connect to the system.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Steve Meoke from 388 Church Street in Russell. In the interest of transparency, you may need to bring up the signed agreement you have on the Church Street development with the developer. But the basic question I have is, can you sort of pop up the numbers on the difference between a force main and a gravity-fed sewer, and how the costs are essentially envisioned, because I think you still have flexibility there, to be partitioned between the township, the developer, and essentially the residents. What I seem to remember, I haven't looked at that document for a long time, is that the force main was relatively inexpensive, maybe $500,000. The gravity-fed sewer that would service phase 1, 2, and 3, etc., was maybe $1.5 million. So there's sort of $1 million that, if I remember correctly, has to be sourced from somewhere. And some of it might have even come from Goodwill, the developer, I just can't remember. So if you have those numbers at your fingertips, or
I don't
if you have
believe
the
we have,
document.
that'll be part of the presentation to the residents on Church Street, Mr. Legault.
Yes, Monsieur Mayor. So yes, obviously, all those numbers and the history of that full project will be presented to council and to be part of the fact sheet that you requested several months ago.
Okay. I just, again, it would be nice to actually talk about those numbers in
Right,
public.
but this
so that
is
you
in
can
regards
actually
to
consider
capital
as well.
charges, this is, and that's not the infrastructure cost.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Sheldon Box, Heritage Road, Russell. I understand that by the end of the evening you may be voting on the capital charges for water and sewer. And I've been listening to the discussions, and I don't envy any of you guys right now to keep track of it, or down here as well. But to keep track of it is really horrendous. There's so many variables. I appreciate that. I know that's hard, and I appreciate the efforts you've made to try to accommodate in a fair way so far. My question would be a favor. If towards the time you come to a vote, if one of you could perhaps take a leadership role and in layman's language summarize things briefly for us. If the vote goes through, the capital charge will be on sewer. If the vote goes through, the capital charge on water will be.
Yes.
And I think you've already given us reassurance that you've passed stuff that will basically give us the option of, you know, only having to pay these if we choose to hook up. So that was taken care of. But the other two, I don't know if I speak for everybody, but I certainly speak for myself. My mind loses track of the, you know, $2,900 here, the $3,900 here, that kind of stuff. So if you could do that for me,
Yes,
I would
well,
appreciate
this will be the recommendation will be coming forward to further discuss, and we will approach it in the same manner, wastewater, water, 2011-55, and the flat fee. That will be the same discussion, so as the amendments come forward, we'll make sure that it's clear for everybody to understand. Conseiller Laurent?
Yeah, sorry, one point I wanted to be clear on, the way you said it, that the option of charging or not charging if you connect or not, that was never an option. It has always been, and correct me if I'm wrong, only if the resident was going to connect to the system would they be charged a capital charge. And again, only if you live within the village core, correct?
No, that's not the way it's written, sorry.
I just want to make sure, because that's what I've been led to believe. If you were within the village
Boundaries.
No, sorry, apologize. But I've asked this question already, and I'm sure I got within the village boundaries of Emblem and Russell are the people that we are talking about, 654 sewer, 254 water, and only the people that decide to connect
We'll pay this fee.
will pay this fee. Now, when I say decide to connect, that's whether they're forced to connect or whether they decide to connect, depending on how council votes. But until there's a connection, you are not being charged.
That's
Am I
correct.
accurate?
Yes, you're correct to say that you're not charged if you don't connect.
And that was the reassurance I thought I had, perhaps I didn't state it just correctly.
Yeah, no, so in the bylaw it specifically states those connecting to the system will pay that fee.
Yeah, and each homeowner will have a choice, you know, within, it's our intent, each homeowner would have a choice if they wanted to join. There won't be, for health reasons, I was mentioned, but there won't suddenly be someone going, oh no, everyone's got to charge or join up now, so that's good work, I appreciate that.
Not a problem.
And I'll look forward to the brief summaries. Thanks.
Will do. Further questions?
And just to confirm, we're voting on this right after the questions.
Yes.
So you're asking when we're gonna vote on it? We're voting on it right after these questions.
Further question, Mr. Field?
Mr. Jim Feely, 109 George. To the point made, it has been reworded under the benefiting properties, 2.2. Properties means all lands within the township of Russell serviced by private sewer and water and not connected to wastewater systems and water systems or both.
You're in regards to section 391 you're
No,
speaking
this
of?
is in the definitions under benefiting properties, so there is no more. It was worded earlier on at some point that it was boundaries of the villages, but that's now anywhere in the village.
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godin, peut-être Madame
Anywhere in the
Tremblay.
township,
Do we service homes outside of the village boundaries? We do not. Yes.
There's some exception, but technically not.
Do we need to reword this then?
Yeah, it should be.
It should be maybe looked at, but technically, we're supposed to service what's inside our village boundary.
So can you give me an example why we would service somebody outside the village boundary? It would be,
Water main going to Marionville, for example, so there's option of connecting throughout the Marionville.
but that's because the system is going by
But
that
that's what I'm
property.
saying, those are example of service houses that could be outside the village boundary, but could be serviced by water. If we were to bring water and sewer to the industrial park, sewer, for example, could be along, depending on the options.
If you were
Those
going
are-
down St. Guillaume, those people could connect
Yeah.
if the system was going by their
Exactly.
property.
But
They're not
then-
necessarily in the village core, but they would have the option of connecting if they so choose to do so.
Yeah, and then we would have to go through an official plan amendment to the county, so it's, technically, that's why I said there's some exception, but technically, we should only service properties that are inside the village boundary.
Okay. Any more questions? No? All right, let's move on with the job at hand. Wait, it's the only item to deal with. So, item A, capital charges bylaw report FS 15, 2019. The council receives report FS 15, 2019, dated April 1st, 2019, and that proposed bylaw be adopted as presented in the second and third reading, imposing a capital charge on private water, wastewater and water systems, conversions to the municipal wastewater system or water system or both. So I need a mover and a seconder to put it on the table, please. Moved by Councillor Tanoski, seconded by Conseiller Brisson. So the first item we were dealing with was wastewater. Do we need to make any amendments in regards to the wastewater? Conseiller Laurent.
I had to make an amendment on the wastewater to say that we impose the fee of $1,236, which is the average between 1414 and 1058 from the report from March the 7th that we showed earlier. So I would say that we impose the fee of $12.36 for wastewater services, rather than the $42.69 being presented in the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So I have it proposed
I will
by,
move it.
moved, seconded. Council,
Can I ask a question? Or
has to be put on the table first. So I need a
Just
second.
put it on the table.
To put on the table, Councillor Tanoski seconds the amendment. We'll deal with all the exact wording afterwards, but we'll get the general gist of it out of the way. So, questions, comments on that amendment? Councillor Tanoski.
So if I can just ask staff if the 1236, by averaging it like that, is accurate, or if one weighs more than the other, happy with an average, as long as the average makes sense, if they're weighted accurately.
Monsieur Godin?
It's a great question, Councilor Tarnowski, and I think if you give me 5 minutes, I can find a slide where it was broken down and we could weight it to have the exact average. For example, if it was 115 Russell.
How about if I word it this way?
Yeah.
That we use the sewer recommendations from the report that gets averaged out based on the units, and staff will go ahead and make that final amount, but that we're using that between the $1,400 and the $1,100 amount. Does that make sense?
Except that he can figure it out real quickly.
Yeah.
So we can have it all figured out before we leave here. So we can maybe move on to
So we'll move on to, you'll find that. Conseiller Brisson, il y a une autre question?
Moi, c'est juste clarifier encore dans le rapport, le 1400, c'est qu'est-ce qui a coûté pour faire la lagune puis la pompe, actually. Mais les DC charges, c'est des charges que ça va coûter. C'est-tu comme ça qu'il y a tant de différence dans le coût? Est-ce qu'on charge trop cher pour le DC? C'est ça que, comme moi, c'est encore la chose là, de 4000 à 1400 que j'ai de la misère à comprendre la différence. Pourquoi que c'est pas plus proche? Parce que ça, c'est les coûts déjà passés. C'est comme, pourquoi qu'il y a une tant de différence entre 1400 à 4000?
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godin?
Merci, M. le maire. Monsieur Poussin, donc, je vous ai beaucoup de critères en jeu par rapport à la différence de prix. Une des choses que je peux dire, c'est par rapport au lagoon puis les coûts qui sont présentés dans les slides qui ont été présentés au mois de mars. Il y a eu plusieurs octrois aussi qu'on ne suit pas nécessairement dessus pour avoir pour les prochains futurs, pour les prochains projets dans l'étude d'ici. Puis je vous ai dit ça, puis toutes sortes de différentes circonstances, c'est vraiment difficile à comparer un puis l'autre. Mais en gros, je te dirais c'est les octrois puis comme le coût de la vie aussi également. Je sais que c'est une grosse différence de 1400 à 4200, mais le 4300 était basé sur les données les plus récentes.
C'est comme on relève qu'une unité est une unité, donc le calcul techniquement devrait être la même chose. Sinon, c'est à cause que pour les DC, on charge trop cher.
Non, juste une clarification. Le prix qui est établi dans le rapport gris là, des coûts de mois passés, ça essentiellement c'était pour, vous avez déterminé qu'est-ce que le monde y avait payé à date. Mais ça inclut les octrois qui ont eu lieu, puis d'autres facteurs qui déterminent que the work, okay, so let's take a step back. In that report, the $1,200 or the $1,000 reflected what it cost for those projects, but that includes grants we got and other factors where we don't necessarily have, or we won't necessarily get. Is that correct?
That's right.
For the DC, we estimate what the cost of the actual project is. If we get grants, that's great, but they're not calculated in the DC charge. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the way I look at this, and the reason why I went with that number, and it's a 65-35 split, or 65-35 split, Russell to Emblem, when you look at the math. So I don't know whether that changes the dynamic of it or not, but I'll let the numbers people figure it out. I think it's 241 of the units of 654 are in Emblem, the rest 441 are in Russell. The way I look at it from what you were saying, Councillor Bidisson, is although we've said that this fee is going to pay for growth, right? This is going to pay for future upgrades to the system. Well, growth is going to pay for those future upgrades. What this is doing right now is This is taking a unit out of the system today, or at the time that it comes out. It's not forecasting and growth, it's forecasting under existing. So it's gonna take an existing unit of sewer out of the system, so the other person can't use that service. So to me, we need to take whatever that existing number is and charge the resident for that number, not the 4,200 that's gonna pay for something down the road, right? Because those projects are all gonna be on the development side. So they've already paid for this, so the people that connect to it now should pay what everyone else has paid up to that point. And that number is what we've been shown, is the 1414 and 1058 number. So to me, that's what should be charged if they're gonna take a unit of sewer out of the system. Growth is gonna pay for the upgrades to the lagoon, to the upgrades to the pumping stations, not the one-offs. So the one-offs here should be paying for taking a unit out of the system. And that's what my amendment is putting forward. Now you can agree or disagree with it, that's fine, but I'm just saying that's the way I see it, and that's the way I'm more comfortable applying this charge. So, I just wanted to, again, the way I see it.
Okay, Monsieur Godin, as-tu de l'information? Bon. Okay. Other questions on the wastewater side? So, Conseiller Tarnowski.
So just procedurally, so we're gonna put an amendment now, whatever the amount Mr. Godin comes up with as the proposed capital charge for wastewater? Is that the intention?
That's the intention. When Mr. Godin provides that number, that's the amendment that'll be on the table.
So we can vote on that.
Right?
We can vote on that right now, right?
Because we know it's gonna be.
We know it's between 1,400 and 1,000.
Monsieur Godin?
Yeah, Jean-Luc, kind of thing.
So I'd like a couple minutes just to revise what I just did, but I have 1234 right now as a number. But let me just.
We'll give you, we want to be clear for our residents what the proposed fee is, so we can move forward with.
Okay, could we discuss the water?
It's on the table though.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Procedurally, it's on the table, the amendment's on the table, so we have to deal with that issue before we move on to the next issue. So do we have a button to play like Jeopardy music for Mr. Godin?
You want an update on the hockey game and the baseball game?
Mr. Godin.
All right. So yeah, the number is 1234.
1234.
If we average it with the weight.
With the weight and everything,
Yeah.
$1,234. That's the amendment by Councillor Lorraine, seconded by Councillor Tarnowski. Any further questions on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? The amendment is carried. So that's wastewater. We will now move on to water. It's already on the table, so any amendments? Conseiller Lorraine.
I'm gonna put an amendment in, I'll start at 0. No capital charges for water.
Okay. Moved by Conseiller Lorraine. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Tarnowski? Questions, comments? Conseiller Brisson?
No, I suggest that we do the same as the sewage, with having the same numbers in that presentation that we did use for the sewage that we use for the water.
So if I'm looking at the presentation, total cost of Emblem water existing to date, 1,106. Do I see, y-a-tu Capol?
1106. It's the same number both.
Oh, it's the same both? So 1106.
Yeah.
So,
I would say that, I would suggest 1106 as that we did use for the waste, that's coming from the same, so.
okay, so Conseiller Lorrain put something on the table, to be at 0. We have a seconder. There's another suggestion, but we can't deal with that that suggestion at this point in time. It's for the amount of 0. Is there any other further questions on the amount of 0? Okay, so I'll call the vote for the on the amount of 0. All those in favor of 0? All those opposed? 0 is carried. Next item was 2011-55. Questions in regards to 2011-55? Any? That's the current bylaw in place for the villages, for the village of Russell and Marionville. Conseiller Lorrain.
Yeah, so at this point, I think what I want is I want a report to come back to us with more information on bylaw 2011-55, because I believe it's specific to a project. And if I'm not mistaken, and if we look it up, there's probably about 60 or 70 houses that were calculated, not all 600 or whatever the number is. So I don't believe I think that was specific to a project. So I'd like that one to come back. So I don't necessarily say repeal, because again, I think it was project specific.
So with the suggestion, in the bylaw, there's a specific section to repeal that. We can just remove that, and it can be
A direction to council to come back.
a direction to the administration to come back to.
Sure, yes. To administrate, long night already. Administration to come back with a report outlining what 2011-55 was.
Encompasses.
And then we can decide whether we want to repeal it at that point or make alterations to it then. I'm not prepared to do that tonight without all the information.
Okay, so that's an amendment to
So-
take that section out of the bylaw itself. A move by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Councillor Tanoski. Questions on that? All those in favor? All those opposed? That section is taken out of the bylaw, and the administration can bring back a report at a further date. Last item was the flat fee. So, Councillor Lorrain.
I may as well finish it off, right? I will make an amendment to suggest that all current people who are paying the flat fee continue to pay the flat fee, and any future people that don't connect then be charged the flat fee, because we've said 0 for water. So anybody that connects, anybody that has the pipe in front of their house and doesn't connect, continue to follow the bylaw.
So, okay, so the existing that are currently paying continue.
And everybody else will then follow the bylaw and pay that flat fee if they don't connect.
If they don't connect.
So I guess the amendment is to leave it alone.
So
Leave the current
essentially-
bylaw alone.
Monsieur Godin?
So that is what we were recommending, so we didn't touch that portion in the bylaw. So
Okay.
if we don't touch anything, then there are people who are paying the flat fee who are not connected will continue to do so.
And anybody else
If we
will.
bring services in front of a property and they don't connect, they will pay.
They will pay that fee. Okay, then I'm leaving it alone.
The fee, the flat fee is roughly
$71.
$358
a year.
$71.
Monsieur Godin?
So the flat fee for water is $344 per year, and for sewer it's $366.
For roughly 700. So people, if the pipe went in front of your house and you decided not to connect, assuming we're talking about both services, most people it's one service, but both service, you're roughly talking about $700 a year. Okay, so we have a mover by, no, actually, there's nothing.
I didn't make any amendment.
There's nothing to, it's not in the bylaw, so you can ask a question. Councillor Tanoski?
I just need clarification. So in the presentation we had, it said flat fee 2017-18 $70. And said, in the presentation that we had back in
La présentation
avec les
grise.
bulles, là, avec les bulles, là. Ça parle de 70 par année.
Est-ce que tu as la page?
C'est dans le
The slide? No,
dans
I have the presentation in front of me, I just wanted to know which slide.
Alternative option.
28-29.
C'est deux avant la conclusion.
29.
Okay, so the numbers that are presented here are the payments towards the Ottawa debt, so it's not the total flat fee, it's just that portion there.
So,
So earlier on, we talked about, because I have a bit of a challenge, like a problem with continuing to charge people a flat fee that may never connect. And I have an issue with that. And Councillor Lorraine talked about, well, in all fairness, and I might not be using the right words for it, but that we should pay back anyone. If we're gonna stop charging, we should either, I think the mayor said, credit people, and then Councillor Lorraine said we should give back the money paid so far. I'm just not sure what the argument is to keep charging those people that flat fee.
Conseiller Lorrain?
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify what I was saying was, I was assuming that a fee was gonna be charged for water, which is why I said we would either credit or refund back, because then they would be charged that fee. We're not charging that fee now. So, to me, the reason why people pay that is because they're paying the cost back to the system, so that when they do connect, they've paid their cost. They're maintaining that pipe because it's in front of their house already. So when they connect in, they're ready to go, and they've been paying the infrastructure and the cost back for the Ottawa Water project. So to me, it still makes sense to charge them that cost because the pipe is in front of their house.
Monsieur Godin?
Merci, Monsieur Martin. So in that same presentation, if you go to pages 16 and 17, we presented a breakdown of the flat fee, just to put you into context as to what that flat fee really pays. And this isn't an argument to go one way or the other, it's just to give you the information. For the water flat fee, which is on page 16, so we can see that about 10% of the flat fee goes towards the Ottawa debt payment. Operation and maintenance represents about 60% of that flat fee, and then the rest, about 30%, is for infrastructure, which is essentially asset management. And the next page is for the sewer fee, where we don't have any debts; they're all financed from DCs. So about 90% of the flat fee is for our operations and maintenance, and about 10% is for asset management.
Conseiller Tarnowski?
So just further clarification needed then. So the people that so the people that we'll see in the future getting infrastructure going down their street, and they chose not to connect with the way we're doing things now, they won't be paying flat fee, correct?
Yes.
They will continue paying the flat fee.
That's
So the flat fee is non-negotiable as of right now, and that's for everybody.
So currently, yes, everybody pays a flat fee. If the pipe goes in front of your house, what our guiding principles has done is not force residents to pay that infrastructure costs, but as it stands right now, they are still responsible to pay a flat fee. Everybody, if the pipe goes in front of your house. Conseiller Blisson and Conseiller Lorrain.
That's why for myself, I would have preferred to have a certain amount when they connect, that the water, that's why I was suggesting the $1,000 some for water whenever they connect, because that's when they're using it, and not charging the one that it's passing in front, but they're not using it. So that's why I'm deceived, because logically I would have seen more charging a bit as the DCs for water, but not for the flat fee.
Conseiller Blisson?
Nothing.
Excuse. Long night.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why this was in place was years ago there was an actual bylaw that anybody that had the pipe in front of their house were forced to connect. So then you had to ask for an exemption to that bylaw. And this was a way to say, okay, you can be exempt, but you must pay, and it started, I think, 50% of the flat fee for a period of time as a way to exempt yourself from having to connect and pay the cost to get to connect into it and whatnot. And then it was determined that it should be 100% of the flat fee. And council agreed that it was 100%. But there was a bylaw in place at one point, I don't believe it's still in place, but that was there where people had to request an exemption every 2 years. And then there was a period, I think there was also a 3-time maximum that they could be exempted, so then they would be forced to connect. So this way here was a way not to force them to connect if the pipe was in front of their house. So that was the trade-off, and the trade-off to me made sense.
Okay. Councillor Associate?
Well, I just wanted to clarify for Ms. Skunis, because was that not part of your question, was if the pipe went in front of your house, would you have to pay anything?
So at this point in time, a flat fee would be applicable if it went in front of your house. Just with the guiding principles, you wouldn't be forced to pay the actual infrastructure cost of 20, 30, 40, whatever $1,000 that is. Okay. Any other questions? So we've taken care of the 4 items. So if I track well, wastewater is $1,236. 34, sorry. I was off by $2. $1,234. Water is 0. And 2011-55 will come back in a report to council at a later date. Are we good with that, Mr. Godin?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and we're removing the repeal from, what you just said.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we'll do is you guys can make the adjustments. We've dealt with this. The bylaw itself will be voted at the end of the meeting, but that's essentially the changes that council has put in place. All right. Thank you very much. So we'll continue. Is that clear?
Thank you. Thank you all.
Question, quickly?
May I, and I appreciate if you'll let me.
Question.
It's regarding the flat fee. So Township is saying that consistently today, if I'm hearing what Councilor Loren said, consistently today, all people that have water running in front of their homes pay this flat fee.
Yeah.
Valcraft, yes. The top end of Forest Road, yes. I'd like to see yeses and nos there.
I can't.
Because I'm just looking for consistency.
Yeah.
There seems to be some changes, some debate whether what's gone on in the past year. I'm just looking for clarity going forward, and those are the 2 areas that I'm specifically questioning.
So the administration is stating?
Valcraft area?
Madame Tremblay?
As soon as they get an occupancy, then they get billed for everything, flat fee, water, sewer, everything else.
Yeah.
So for new houses, I'm talking about?
Right, so if it's a model home,
Yeah.
for example, that's not occupied, they're not paying for that property, but as soon as the house is sold, a new tenant comes in, they get occupancy, then they start paying that flat fee.
So that's different than what I've been told, but that doesn't mean I was told the truth, so. That's why I raised the question.
Perfect, thank you very much. All right, we'll continue on with our meeting. Item C, removal of part lot control, report PD 21-2019. Property owned by Tartan Homes Corporation, legally described as 154, 156, 158, 160, 162, 164, 168, 170, Boxcar, Crescent, and Russell. Questions, comments, members of council?
Mr. Mayor, did we go to 11B motion?
Okay, we only did 8. We didn't finish 8.
B. Mais B, c'était pas un bylaw.
No, but it was the motion that you did at 11A.
Oh, okay. The direction. Ben, on a eu des discussions là-dessus, so council can perhaps, the new recommendation in yellow that was up on the screen, that's what we have to deal with. We already suspended the rules of procedure to do it. Okay, bring it back, and we'll get it done with. B.
While they're getting it, I'll make the amendment.
Okay, so So moved and seconded, moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Conseiller Tarnowski. So, Councillor Lorrain?
I'll make the amendment to stop the wording at proceed with the project and erase if a majority of 70% of the residents agree with the proposed cost.
Okay, so we have that, a mover for that. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Conseiller Brisson. Questions, comments, members of council? Monsieur Leduc?
Yeah, and just with the understanding that once we do our presentations and the take-up is very low, then we have to report back to council to say it's too low and we'll have to carry too much.
Yeah.
Then we may have to recommend to you that.
That's my understanding of what we're doing here.
Yeah. I'm comfortable with that. Everybody's comfortable with that?
Yeah, so we can still kibosh it if the uptake.
If it's not big, and if it's not a high enough number.
Because or else people have a note saying, I'm not interested.
But again, as I mentioned earlier, the only thing is that we're only talking to the church people, Church Street people right now, not necessarily the other areas
That's right.
that have
Yeah.
the potential to connect as well.
As she bows her head.
Okay. All right, so the administration's good with that amendment? Everything's understood? So all those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? The amendment is carried. To approve as the recommendation as amended, all those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Now we're back on track?
I think so.
Okay, so item C, moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by
We're
Conseiller.
not voting on that, we're just talking about it.
Oh, yeah,
We're not
okay.
resolution.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions on C? No? We'll move on to the next item. Item D, agreement with 211 Ontario. The council receives report PIC 09-2019 dated April 1st, 2019 for information purposes only. Need a, no, don't need to move in a second. Questions from members of council on the 211? Item D. Quelque chose à ajouter, Madame Bordeaux? Pretty self-explanatory. It's a nice service. If we start being overused, then we'll have to come back and negotiate, but perfect. All right, item E, construction and paramedic building, report ISPW02. The council receives report ISPW02 dated March 18, 2019, and approves the proposed bylaw to award a contract and to authorize the entry into an agreement with Bourgon Construction Limited to perform all necessary work for the construction of the paramedic building for $1,813,342 plus $31,914.82 equals $1,845,256.82. This amount includes 1.76% of non-refundable HST. The council authorized the administration to negotiate the final details with the contractor before signing the agreement, and that the mayor and the clerk be authorized to sign the agreement. Questions, comments, members of council? Conseiller Tarnowski.
Just for the record, I want to confirm that there are no ties between Mr. Jonathan Bourgon and Bourgon Construction. No.
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Bourgon, you got shares in the company?
No, I don't. And that was my first point I was going to clarify to council. There's no relation between myself and that company.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Any other question, comments? Conseiller Lara?
Just for consistency, can we confirm which report is correct, whether it's the report or the actual Appendix A from Collier? Because there's certain numbers that were transposed. Can we just make clear which numbers are right?
To answer your question, so there's an error in the report, so the recommendation from Collier has the right number. So in my report, I did mixed up the number from Freecon Construction and Topcon Construction, so they need to be reversed.
Okay.
But in the recommendation itself, it's the proper numbers.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just showing that Freecon was the highest bidder, but they weren't the highest bidder. They were actually the second lowest bidder.
That's correct.
And Topcon was actually the highest bidder.
Okay.
So that's one thing. So the second thing that I have, if you may, here's where I have an issue. When you got an outlier to the group of bidders, right? I know we only had 4 bidders. 3 chose not to bid out of the 7. You've got one at 1.8, and everyone else is at 2.2, 2.3. the difference between the top bidder and the lowest bidder is 24% higher. So I always get concerned when there's a huge price difference between the top and bottom bidders, because I always sit there and go, what did they see that somebody else didn't? Or, you know, where my concern lies is change requests. And I know it's common in the construction industry where somebody will bid something low and then everything's a change order after that because we've interpreted something differently than they've interpreted it. And then all of a sudden the cost goes way above what the highest bidder was. And we sit back and go, well, why did, if everything was apples to apples comparison, and I know this one because it's an RFP and everyone's bidding on their own project, that you really can't get an apples to apples comparison, but a 24% difference in price concerns me. I'm just making the comment, I'll still go with the recommendation because you guys are the experts, but it concerns me significantly when I have 3 outliers and we're going with the lowest bidder. So,
Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Bourgon?
Yeah, I would like to add to Councillor Lorrain a comment that all bidders were provided with a big list of requirements that they had to bid on. Floor plan, like different type of rooms, 4 bays. So everybody was bidding on the same skeleton of building. So there's a full list, and I can share that information with council as well. That all bidders had the same information in hand, and we also, and that's why we see your recommendation is to negotiate with them, is to make sure that they understood and they captured everything as well before we signed the contract.
And this was evaluated as well by Collier, who are project managers?
Exactly.
Okay. I'll say Larry.
but correct me if I'm wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong, it also does state that there was some ambiguity to the RFP in the first place, and no one bid on it, or didn't bid on it properly, or couldn't bid because it was too ambiguous, and therefore an addendum had to be submitted. So it didn't go out properly the first time. So I just want to make sure, again, we got a 24% price difference. I still want to make sure that we're getting an apples to apples comparison, which we were not, right? So again, it concerns me when there's that much of a price difference that somebody didn't see things the right way. And ultimately, we're going to end up paying more for it. Always my concern.
Monsieur Bourgon, quelque chose à ajouter?
Well, following our meeting with them, and if there's a big change, we would report it back to council.
And just, there's a line here, due to the variance in price between Bourgon and the other proponents, we recommend holding a contract negotiation meeting with Bourgon prior to contract signing to ensure there are no exclusions. We have done that, Monsieur Bourgon?
We haven't met with them yet, because we need kind of the direction from council to be in a position to be able to negotiate with them after it's clear that they're gonna have the contract in a way, if I can say it that way. So just to follow procedures, now we'll be able to, if council agrees to the recommendation, we'll be in a position to need to sit down with them and negotiate, and we'll report back if need be.
Yeah, exactly. If all of a sudden, they missed this, this, and this, their price would jump significantly, whatever the case is, you'll come back to council and we'll be able to revisit. Is that correct?
That's right.
Conseiller Larin?
Well, I see that in the report, but how can we award a contract and then say, go negotiate? Are we kind of saying 2 different things in the same resolution or in the same recommendation? I just want to make sure we're clear.
Monsieur Leduc?
I think it's terminology that we have in our procurement policy file, where in that circumstance, when we're not sure of certain things, we want to make sure we have certain things. Negotiating means sitting down with them and discussing it.
Oh, that part I understand.
Okay.
But in the top part, you say, the bylaw, approve a bylaw to award a contract and to authorize the entry into an agreement with Bourgon Construction. Below, then it says, and that council authorize the administration to negotiate the final details with the contractor before signing the agreement.
So essentially, we're giving permission to the administration to be able to negotiate the final deals and get it finally assigned if need be. If ever there's a discrepancy, then they have the option of coming back at
So
that
you're
point
gonna
in
come
time.
back to us if there's is there a percentage increase that we need to discuss for it to come back? So that administration has some leeway here, or are we saying 0 and anything above comes back?
Monsieur Le Duc, Monsieur Bourgon?
Well, I would think that if anything that's getting close to the other numbers, certainly would be questioned, the whole process. If we're looking at different, $10,000, $5,000, $20,000, it may just be a range that is satisfactory depending on what they understood. But if you guys too close to the other numbers, then we have to really revisit that. We would have, if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I gotta see where that threshold, again, sorry, Mr. To me, I guess there needs to be a threshold there, because at that point in time, on the technical merits, if you're talking a $40,000 or $50,000 difference between that one and the next one up, from a technical perspective, where did they land on it? I think I'd like to see a percentage here,
So but
or a number.
I think the suggestion, go ahead, Mr. Le Duc.
In the RFP, there are criteria list. And the pricing, there's 50 points based on the value, okay? And there's a ratio given in their scoring to the others compared to the winning bid. So if that winning bid is increased, therefore the ratio for the other ones changes, so the scoring value changes also. So then they would have to see how the scoring changes overall. Does someone else come close to one, or somebody surpasses one?
Okay.
So that's the formula where
So then you won't sign that agreement if that changes, and you'll come back to us,
Exactly.
even though we've authorized you to sign the agreement.
Yeah, there's two parts of this, need to buy out to move ahead, and then get the merit, and then click to sign if ever we're satisfied with what's presented to us.
Just to clarify, when we talk about change in percentages and so forth, there might be changes, but they might still remain the lowest bidder. Is that correct? So are you asking that if that's still the case, when everything's readjusted apples to apples and they're still the lowest bidder, are you expecting it to come back to council?
That they are still the recommended bidder,
Yes.
not necessarily the lowest bidder.
Correct, yes.
They are still meet the recommended bidder criteria.
Yeah.
And that could be point awarding of however the decision is made. If that's the case, then I'm okay with it. If not, then
Then it comes back.
yeah.
That was my point, is that it's not based on dollars only, it's all points.
The point system. Okay, perfect. We're good to move on? Item F, tree giveaway report ISPW 04-2019. The council receives report ISPW 04-2019 dated April 1st, 2019, approves the tree giveaway event on May 4th, 2019 with South Nation Conservation, and approves to match the grant of $500. Questions, comments, members of council? Councilor Sosi.
Yeah, I was happy to see this, and we're planning on doing this at the hazardous waste day. And I think most of the EAC members will be there to help out, and it's kind of a nice addition to give each resident that comes in a tree to take home and plant after they get rid of all their hazardous waste. So, yeah.
Conseiller Brisson?
Juste peut-être une recommandation, parce qu'il y en a qui vont aller mener des déchets, peut-être qui n'ont plus de place, ou ils n'ont pas de place pour les arbres, pour les mettre. Je me demanderais s'il y aurait des places qui pourraient être désignées pour la municipalité, que dire, OK, faire une contribution, que ces arbres-là soient mis à la municipalité, parce que si les personnes qui vont mener des déchets, tu sais, qui est en appartement, où il y a vraiment une petite place.
Yeah, c'est pas nécessairement. N'importe qui peut aller recevoir un arbre. C'est pas juste le monde qui amène quelque chose.
Ah, je pensais que c'était juste ceux qui
Non, c'est
recevaient.
juste, on le fait en même temps pour économiser le temps et essayer de promouvoir les deux événements. So it's not necessarily somebody who's bringing hazardous waste that gets a tree. It could be anybody that goes and gets a tree that day. And we'll promote both at the same time.
Ça serait peut-être une fois mauvais, par exemple, s'il y avait une place, que si quelqu'un dit, ah ben, même je voudrais en avoir des arbres, mais que j'ai pas place chez nous, qu'on aurait une place qui dit, ah, à la municipalité, si vous voulez les planter pour nous.
Ben, je pense que s'il reste des arbres à ce point-là, on va trouver des places pour les planter. Okay. Other questions?
I have a backyard.
You got a backyard?
I just put a pool in, so I need to put some trees in.
So you'll have to go there that day and get a free tree, just like any other resident, so there's no benefit.
So each one of my family will
Councillor Sosa.
Well, I was just gonna add at the same time, I just wanted to also congratulate Councillor Brisson on his initiatives and endeavors, and saw the copy in the paper, so félicitations.
Councillor for Russell County. And there's a reason we have discussions about branding coming up.
Oh, is that what it said?
At one place, it said one red in the county.
Okay,
Just one question, if the trees, are they all the same kind, is it all the conifer or it's a mix of?
Non, dans le rapport, il y a quelle différence ça?
Il y a une liste qui a été proposée par Salvation. Donc, on encourage la recommandation qu'ils nous font.
Okay. Parfait.
Or sorry, May 4th.
May 4th, I'd love to be there, but May 4th is my godson's Star Trek theme wedding. And that's where I'm going to be that day. May the 4th be with you.
That's the speech.
Star Wars, yeah. Oh yeah, I got the costumes are all coming out that day.
I won't be able to be there either.
Item G, festival license for a special event with alcoholic beverage, report PR 08-2019, request from the Russell Ag Society for the annual Russell Fair, September 9th to the 5th to the 9th, 2019. Pretty standard. Question, comments, members, council? No, anything to add from the admin? No, move on. Item H, noise bylaw amendment report PIC 10-2019. The council receives report PIC 10-2019 dated April 1st, 2019, approves as recommended in the report the noise bylaw exemption to allow the Russell Legion to hold a parking lot party fundraiser in the parking lot of the Russell Legion between 12 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. on June 15th, 2019. Questions, comments, members of council? Councilor Sosi.
Yeah, I read this report. I'm totally in favor of a fundraiser for the roof. But my question was, why are they having it so long? Because I know there was also a parking issue. So they were gonna move the cars to the fairgrounds. But I'm thinking noon till, they're having a live band, so there'll be noise from noon until 10:30 at night. And I just have concerns with people consuming alcohol that long and then going and getting in the car that they've arranged the parking for. So I just thought maybe 12 to 6 or 7 would be more reasonable. They could have a barbecue and.
Well, I think people aren't necessarily, some people might stay there the entire day, but I think it'd probably be a lot of in and out as well. So
Those are some of my concerns.
Yeah.
6 hours.
Yeah.
Just as easy.
Councilor Lorraine?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, every festival that you go to is pretty much an all day long event. Canada Day starts at noon and goes till dusk, and that's a full day event as well, right?
But this is right in the residential area, like it's different than when it's at the fairgrounds, because it's, got neighbors all the way around, so.
Well, I'm just talking about the concern about the consumption of alcohol.
Oh, okay.
That piece, I mean, it's the same with any festival. If we're talking, if it's the problem with the noise, that's a different aspect of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, I'm okay with it,
Everyone has to be smart.
but everyone is responsible for their own getting there, getting home type of scenarios. I mean, we can't legislate
No.
here
And everybody has smart.
for their, smart serve is always part of it, so I don't see that as our
But this is a
requirement.
noise exemption bylaw, so then again, like I said, it's right in a
Let's hear
residential
from
area.
Madame Bordeaux.
Yes, it's a noise exemption. The reason why I brought it to council is just for that reason. It's because it's surrounded by residential properties. And the noise bylaw states 11 o'clock. And they intend to stop at 10:30, but still, because it's
Not
in the
very
middle
good.
of residential properties, I think that a noise exemption is necessary, or else if numerous complaints are lodged to the OPP might close them down, so.
Councilor Lorraine?
Yeah, will there be a range of people that will be notified that this is?
I've requested that they do that, yes.
Okay.
It's the first time we do it.
Yes.
See how it goes, and if it seems to be a problem, then next year, then if it comes back again, council will have a decision at that point in time. But as a first, and I think there'll be, for the most part, the Legion is respectful, and I think they'll be able to handle themselves appropriately in that state.
Hopefully there will be a lot of people.
Yeah. Councillor Sosi?
I guess the other thing was just, the amount of people that they're expecting, like they're talking 300 people in the parking lot.
Liquor license rules.
Pardon me?
The liquor license rules will supersede.
Yeah, it's outside, you understand?
Yeah,
It's
in the
not
parking
inside,
lot.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Any other questions? Move on. Item I, Backyard Hen Report PD 24-2019. The council received report 24-2019 dated April 1st, 2019. The council concurs with the planning department and the public safety and enforcement department recommendation to proceed with option 2 of this report with an extensive public consultation on permitting hens in an urban area. April Fools? No?
Yeah, really.
All right, questions, comments, members of council on this one? Conseiller Tarnowski.
So I wasn't 100% sure what we were being asked, but it's to do research, right? That's the whole point. So if it's based on that survey, I think question 8 probably should be the first question. Like, are you a resident of Russell Township? That should probably be the first question to ask. And I found question 10 really repetitive, somewhat repetitive, if you were asking for comments about the survey.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Anything to add from the administration?
Bonsoir. Donc, non, c'est simplement pour faire suite au processus de règlement de zonage. Il y avait plusieurs questions de personnes qui nous avaient demandé quand on regarderait l'option de peut-être avoir des poules urbaines. Donc, c'est simplement pour demander l'autorisation du conseil, d'informer le conseil de ça va être quoi les procédures qu'on entend faire, soit les surveys, une réunion publique, and then we'll bring back the information on council to either decide to proceed with the bylaw or not to proceed.
Okay.
It's basically to look at options.
Okay. Councillor Sosi?
And just to verify the lot size, like I had read, like, are we going with the full acre, or could it be a?
So this is one of the questions that we'll ask to see if what people feel that should be a lot size acceptable to have hens in their backyard. And we also have like an example from other municipalities saying that in some it's an acre, it's permitted, some it's like, so it varies. So we'll come back with a proposition to council to either limit the number and the size of the lot size.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Okay. Other questions? No? We'll move on. Item 12, reports from an investigator or ombudsman, none. Item 13, notice of motions, we have none. Item 14, question period on meeting of the day. Nobody else in the room, so we have none. You have a question? You want to go use that one?
I do not. I just want to, under number 12.
Yep.
When it says reports from an investigator or ombudsman.
Yep.
Would the integrity commissioner fall under investigator, or do we have to specifically state another section?
No, that's essentially what the integrity commissioner is, an investigator.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was clear, so if there is anything.
Okay, perfect. Move on, resolutions. Motion that council approve all recommendations listed on the agenda under number 11, reports from departments and council committees. Do I say excluding A and B because they've already been voted on? Excluding A and B. Tu veux-tu un mover and seconder pour l'exclusion? Parce qu'il a déjà été...
Yeah, just for the main, because we already included in the first one that we were excluding them, and now we were going ahead with A and B right away, so.
Okay, excluding A and B. So, need a mover and seconder, moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Conseiller Brisson. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Move on to item 16, bylaws. Motion that council approves bylaw 2018-082 for second and third reading as listed on the agenda. 2018-082 being a bylaw to impose capital wastewater charges and capital water charges for a portion of the capital costs on the use of the township's water system, wastewater system and water system by privately serviced lands, converting and connecting to the township's wastewater and water. Monsieur Leduc, Monsieur Godin, do we have the new revised? We have the new revised changes.
Do you want to see it on the screen? The only thing in the bylaw is to remove 11.3. That was the repeal of the other bylaw,
Yeah.
55 2011. And for the attachment, Mr. Godin completed.
Yeah, we've also updated the schedule of the fees, so 0 for water, 12.34 for wastewater, and we've kept the same ratio for as if it's an apartment, if it's a commercial or whatnot, the same ratio as for the DC studies. So that's it. Just pour montrer
In
comment.
the event folder,
How does this,
schedule
just,
A to bottom revised.
just to be clear, you talk about the ratio. So have we changed the ratio for commercial now and industrial? Because we made the change to the residential?
Well, yeah, so basically the fee for the DCs, if it's residential, it's a different fee if it's a single and semi, if it's an apartment with 2 bedrooms, apartment bachelor with 1 bedroom. They're all based on the average number of residents in those unit types, right? So we follow that same, we've always been using the singles and semis as a reference point.
Right.
But this attachment's always been there with this is the same schedule as in the DC bylaw, basically.
But but I mean, the DC charge, is what we have in place, and the ratios, if we, like, have we changed the ratios for the commercial and stuff to coincide with the cheaper rate? I guess what I'm asking. So yeah, from what I see here, it's 0 across the board. So right now, the way we've done it is, commercial, I'm asking, have we changed commercial?
Yeah, so we use the same ratios, unless council asks to do otherwise. Peut-être ouvrir la cédule
Because-
avant le changement.
Because there are examples of commercial in Russell, the old food land, for example. If they connect to the water system, or the wastewater? No, both. If they connect, they're not gonna pay anything. If they keep the same building. If they tear down the building, and would it be a new construction, they'd pay DC, but if they keep the existing building and decide to connect, we're losing that revenue. I just wanna be clear, is that what council wants? Or were we just specifically,
They're already under the water. So
Eh?
they're already connected, so they
they're
should
connected
not-
on one but not both services?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, I don't know how many examples there are,
Il y a nécessaire pour
But
45 cents, je pense que ça fait, à l'autre chose, tu avais 45 cents au commercial quand tu reconnectes.
yeah, but water, is there anybody, apart from residential, is there anybody in the village cores that's not on water?
In the commercial?
Like commercial, like I'm just, eh? So I just wanna make sure, like, I know we talk about residential, that's what we were deciding on, but we didn't really discuss if we're gonna put the same ratios in place for every other, system. So I just think we need to have that conversation before we enshrine this.
Il y a combien d'exemples où c'est commercial qui n'ont pas d'eau ou des égouts?
Parce qu'il y a encore du monde ici en arrière qui sont pas connectés. Which essentially we're saying they're gonna be able to connect for free now. Is it? But.
They were also they're already being exempted on this bylaw, right?
Right, okay, so I just wanna make sure that this is what,
The water is exempt, not the sewer. Not exempt from sewer.
no, but if the administration, I just wanna be clear.
I mean, yeah, and I think it's good to have that conversation, because we didn't go into details when we talked about it, right? So we
Right.
just talked about that singles and semis, right? So if council wants to keep.
So could we leave, can we specify in the new fees, the capital, that the 155 and the 171 for non-residential, can we keep that in the amended version? Would council be okay with that?
Si tu l'as baissé pour les résidentiels, pourquoi tu l'as baissé pas pour les commerciales qui utilisent encore moins le système que le résidentiel? Dans le commercial, souvent, ils ont une toilette, une ou deux toilettes, un restaurant un petit peu plus, mais pas comparé à
Je
une
pense
maison.
pas qu'il y ait de gros d'exemples.
Parce que la plupart des commerciales, il y a encore bien moins
So I'll put it this
d'utilisation.
way, if ever we decide to service the industrial park, that'll be specific to that area, or are we gonna base ourselves on this?
They're outside the village core.
Right, but as stated, we sometimes bring services to the outside. I don't wanna put ourselves in a position where we bring services to the industrial park and all of a sudden, there is no capital charges for them to connect to the system.
So why don't we just leave it as for residential?
So we'll make the changes for residential, but leave the non-residential at the current rates. So, do you wanna show the new,
So we are then revise so schedule So we put back the 155 and 171?
yeah, that's what I'm suggesting. I don't think there's many examples of,
And the servicing industrial park is gonna be its own animal anyway.
most likely, but, you know, by putting it at 0, you're setting a precedent, but, you know. Well, then it says non-residential at this end.
Just at the end, just plus.
Conseiller Brisson?
Je reviens encore que le non résidentiel, pourquoi qu'il repayera si l'autre on ne l'a pas fait venir, il en utilise encore moins.
You could make the same argument for taxes. Why, if we're charging residential 1 point in tax, why are we charging commercial 1 point? There's a lot of factors when it comes to commercial. Monsieur Leduc?
L'argument utilisé au point d'ancien, c'est la consommation. C'est le milieu tient compte de la consommation. Quand tu fais au restaurant, quand même, qu'il y a plus, seulement que s'il y a plus de fixtures, là, le règlement, là, ils vont payer plus parce qu'il y a plus de fixtures, il y a plus d'unités. Mais par rapport à la consommation, c'est le milieu qui vont payer plus. So, s'ils utilisent moins, mais il y a une fixture, ben, c'est comme une fixture de maison.
This is just in regards to, we're talking about the capital charge. For a non-residential connecting to the system. I think we've been very generous with residential, with what we've put in place tonight. You know, but do we wanna, I'm just stating, do we wanna do the same thing with the commercial? And like I said, I don't think there's many commercial that would be applied. Yeah, but Foodland's the first one that jumps out to me, is that if they decide to connect to the system, we're talking about so many thousand square feet that we're losing that revenue.
They had sewer, they didn't have sewer.
They have what currently?
I'm pretty sure they're on both private service.
They're on both private services. The
The old-
existing,
the
the old
old-
building.
The old building.
The old building.
But the service is at the property.
It's at the property line, but the way it was priced out in the first version, they wouldn't pay anything to connect to the system. If they connect.
I think they're tearing it down anyway.
Yeah,
Building a
most
new building like
likely.
they do, so.
But again, clarification for that, if they were to tear down,
They have a credit for 5 years.
they have a credit for 5 years, but there's no credit, like if,
The DC credit is for 5 years.
so what would be the credit, in this case, whatever,
It's whatever the credit that is
the value of the credit?
up to date.
Okay. Well, it's like a home, if one of the houses in the area decide to go commercial, they, you know, they have it at 0 and they decide to go commercial, well, and then they decide to connect. There's that fee. So, everybody's okay with the leaving the non-residential at the current rates? Okay, perfect. So that was pretty much, so we have it on the table, Madame Camille Lafemme, right? So all those in favor? All those opposed?
Sorry, I didn't, no.
No, didn't write that. Mover and a second. Moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Councillor Kanowski. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Now we'll deal with bylaws and attachment. Bylaw 2019-57 for Tartan Homes, 58 for the paramedic building. Need a mover and seconder. Moved by Conseiller Brisson, seconded by Councillor Associate. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Item 17, new business reports, we have none. Item 18A, Councillor Lorrain for recycling collection.
Thank you very much. So I sent an email off last Thursday, I think it was, after speaking to a local business. And I think there's a couple of instances that we've been made aware of over the last little while. I'm sure that you got a number for me, where there's some small business. So let me go back. So last June timeframe, May, June timeframe, council decided that anybody with a recycling bin, and there's a list in the contract of all the big businesses that have bins, or anyone that chooses to have a bin, that were part of the recycling contract, and that we said, no, you're no longer part of the recycling contract, you pay it separately, just like you pay separate garbage today. Turn the clock to January, and it seems as though, if I read the letters that went out to the business owners correctly, ABC has made a statement to the township that it's taking too long at certain small businesses to pick up their recycling. So they recommended to administration to cancel their service. So administration sent out letters to these businesses. I know of 3: Village Bakery, Town and Country Video, Milano's Pizza. Milano's Pizza is the latest one that sparked this. And here's where my concern is. There's multiple concerns as per my email, and I shared it with all of council, is, to me, Milano's has done everything right with their recycling. They put out maybe a garbage bag a week, which is what we want, waste diversion. They take their tin themselves and sell it off and make a little bit of money off the recycling that way on their own, and then recycle everything else, and they compost. So they're trying to do their part. And what happened is we said, thank you for doing your part. Now find a way to do it yourself now, because we're not gonna do it for you anymore. So I found that, after the first one, which was Town and Country Video, and then they kind of jumped, in my opinion, they jumped the gun on that one. Now this one, I have a problem. So I asked 7 questions.
Yep. And so we'll go through those questions so the people at the webcast can see what the questions are.
Yeah.
So I guess my first question, Mr. Bourgon, when were these letters sent?
Throughout the process of switching over to our 2 stream, we send a few letters here and there. We went on what was reporting to us by our contractor. So the ones that Councillor Lorrain is referring to were sent in January this year.
Okay. Did they contact the department at all?
The affected businesses?
Yeah.
Out of the 10 letters that were sent in that case,
10.
okay, 5 reached out to us.
Okay.
And how many were reversed?
What do you mean exactly?
How many is ABC now picking up their garbage or their recycling instead of not picking it up?
Like how many businesses we are serving?
No.
No.
Of the 10,
yeah.
you said 5 contacted you.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know Town and Country have been reinstated and picking up theirs. So I'm saying is how many have been reversed of the 5?
How of the 5? There's 3.
3 have been reversed.
Yeah, that we came up to. We had the business owner had either an explanation of that specific week that the ABC reported to us that one of them I remember missed a couple of weeks of collection, so it ended up making that large amount that week. So there's actually 3 that out of those 5 contacted us, and we had an explanation.
Rectified.
Yeah.
So the proper process, I know we're there to represent all the businesses and they come to us, but the first step should be have you contacted the department to have those questions answered? And it might alleviate a lot of back and forth for the members of council. But let's start with the questions.
I think it goes before that with my questions.
So the first question was, does ABC have the right to put a time limit for recycling collection?
Based on the contract that we have currently with them, they don't.
Okay.
Because it's clearly stated in the contract in our bylaw that there's no limit for recycling for residential.
For residential?
We use the same analogy for businesses.
Excluding the ones that we've identified in the appendix that have bins.
That's correct.
Okay. If so, where is that in the contract? Because I don't see it.
So-
Stated he doesn't have it, it's not there.
So
If
go to 4.
what is I just want to read them out so people know
Okay.
what the questions were. If so, number 3, what is the amount of time they use as a metric and how is that time? That doesn't apply. 4, how many small businesses have received notices from the township that they exceeded the acceptable timeframes for recycling pickup, and who are they? So
I don't need to know who they are, just the
You
amount
said-
at this point.
you said 10?
Yeah, 10, they received that same letter that Councillor Laurent is referring to.
Okay. If a resident has too much garbage,
It's recycling.
recycling, I'm sorry. If a resident has too much recycling, can they be removed from this service?
Residents, no.
No. If so, well, it doesn't apply. 7, if so, what is the threshold maximum recycling allowance for residents? That doesn't apply. 7, has the change in the collection process bi-weekly caused the issue for businesses? If so, how can we deal with it? Mr. Bogo?
We did receive calls from different businesses, but most of them we were able to address with them either by education of the why we switch to two-stream, or we were able to at least came out with a solution that worked out for those businesses.
Okay, want to say that?
So, I think you know what my question is gonna be is, if they came to you and said, we're not gonna pick up from these anymore, why did we accept that? Why did we allow that if it's not defined in the contract that they can actually do that?
Mr. Lidzik, Mr. Bogo?
I guess can be 2 parts in my answer. Some of them we knew that they were putting out it's a huge amount, a few yards, so on a skid or in a different rack or different scenarios. And the second part, maybe we should have done maybe a larger sample of collection. I mean, to the assessment of those locations before sending
To see if
the
it was a
letter.
one-off or if
Or
it's
if
on a
it was
continual
something
basis.
that had to be addressed in that way.
So
For us, we should have done a better assessment before sending those letters.
So my question is in regards to, as Councilor Lorraine stated, there's some areas specifically laid out in the contract.
Big business.
Well, not necessarily big business, but
Well,
The big producer of
cardboard.
A garbage and recycling that have their own bins.
So, but there's no threshold, if you will, to say, okay, you're producing too much, can you get a bin? There's nothing in the contract to allow for that transition.
We did ask some businesses that they were putting several yards at the road, and they told us, yeah, no problem, we'll do the switch, which ends up being more convenient for them as well.
Okay, Councilor Lorraine?
Can we go back and revisit the 7 that have, because you said 5 didn't contact you.
That's great.
So, I don't know if Milano's Pizza did contact you or not.
No, we never received
So,
any comments.
can you reach out to the 7 or the 5 that didn't contact you and go through it? Because even the 3 that even the ones that ABC has no ability to make that determination. So I don't see why we even sent the letters out. So I know for Milano's as an example, my opinion is we should be putting a plaque in their window that said, you guys have done everything right, not take away their service. So I would like those 5 revisited as soon as possible. And if they've chosen not to put a bin up, that we reinstate their service immediately. That's what I would like to see. Because I think we've erred here, in my opinion, in allowing the company to dictate what we do for our residents and our small businesses when they have no ability to do so. So that's what I would like to see. I don't know if that's a direction from council, and whether or not we can direct administration to go and revisit those 5 that haven't contacted us and reinstate their service.
Monsieur Leduc?
Monsieur le Maire, Conseil, do you mean reinstate a service if they went to a bin collection?
If they're okay with the bin, then say fine.
Yeah.
But if they went to a bin out of anger because they got their system cut, and they'd rather have it picked up by the contractor, I think we give them that option. Because they were forced to go to the bin by this and not chose to. Now, the ones that said they were okay with it because it made sense to them, then leave it, if that's what they want. But the others, then let's and I don't think we should be doing that. That's just my.
Okay. Councillor Associate and Conseiller Brisson?
And, yeah, and to add to that, I know a couple of businesses stated that they didn't have room, like Milano's, for instance, there's nothing at the back there of the store to put something like a large bin, because they're packed right in there, the way the business is located. And I know we had discussed at the EAC, previously, that we did want to recognize businesses that are doing a good job, and we even talked about giving possibly a certificate or something and saying thank you for making the effort. And so I know some of them, like the Village Bakery, they really are trying to recycle as much as they can and not have it go to landfill, and that should be what we're striving for.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I look forward to a recommendation from the Environmental Committee to move forward with some kind of recognition. Conseiller Brisson and Conseiller.
Oui, parce que surtout dans les plus petits business, on essaye d'encourager le recyclage. Puis souvent, si on leur dit d'aller dans le privé, qu'est-ce qui arrive? Ils disent il faut qu'ils payent pour une bin de garbage, puis une bin de recyclage. Ils vont juste à la bin de garbage parce que c'est le même. Autrement, il faut qu'ils payent pour deux choses. Ça fait que là, on remet encore, on décourage le recyclage. Je comprends qu'il y en a quand c'est pour du plus gros, bien quelque chose, mais dans des plus petites, si on peut encourager ces business-là, de leur donner un coup de main en prenant le recyclage, parce que je trouve ça juste de valeur que justement il y a des résidences, surtout s'ils font une bonne job pour faire le recyclage, parce que je comprends dans les résidences des fois que la chose de recyclage, c'est bien mélangé puis ça vient contaminer, mais qu'autrement ça finit que ça fait juste au garbage parce qu'ils prennent juste un service.
Is it unreasonable to think that we can contact these people by the end of the week? Is that unreasonable?
Monsieur Bourgon, you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Okay. Monsieur Brisson?
Puis il avait mentionné qu'il y en avait 5 puis qu'il y en avait 3 qui avaient été remis, mais les deux autres, est-ce que ça avait vraiment été parce qu'il y en avait vraiment trop qui faisaient?
Monsieur Bourgon?
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Donc oui, donc ces deux-là nous ont quand même contactés, mais eux, c'est dans quand même nos plus problématiques en fait de quantité. Donc on a expliqué, on leur a donné des options, puis ils sont satisfaits là, maintenant d'aller avec un contenant.
Okay. Conseiller Lorrain?
The only thing that I can suggest is that and again, well, thank you for the contracts, I went through it. If ABC does have a problem with timing, because that seemed to be their thing, then there is a mechanism in the contract that allows them to make a written request to staff to go outside of their timeframes of 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. So if that was their concern, then there always was a metric in their contract that allowed them to ask for an extension, whether it's 10, 15, 20-minute extra, to pick up those extras. So they have the mechanism in place. I think they took the easy way rather than the right way. So.
One of, since we're talking about our provider for garbages, a comment was made the other day that normally the garbage truck has to go up the street one side, come down the street the other side to pick up the garbage. It was just pointed out that there's instances where the person's running on both sides of the street on very busy streets, and that could be a security risk, or I don't know, just to have a look and see if there's issues we have to look at that point. Conseiller Lorrain?
Yeah, I've never seen that, but I know we're talking. I've said bad things tonight about it and whatnot, but I did see them. I did see a truck driver. There was a garbage bag on the side of the road, and he got out as the other guy was getting his stuff, and he went across the street and grabbed it and put it in the back. So there was they do the right thing, and they pick up the garbage, in my opinion, in a very timely manner. It just in this circumstance, I wasn't happy with what they did.
Okay. Now we go to item B, Councillor Associate, in regards to wrap-up.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Demare. Just wanted to announce April 10th to 13th, Russell Area Performing Arts is putting on Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. And tickets are available. It's at Russell High School, so you can either get them online at Russell Pronto or Place d'Embrun Lotto. And it should be a great production. A lot of local people are in it, including a counselor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Associate. C, local sports, Councillor Lorraine.
Yeah, and I'll put a shout out to the lead in that play, which is Leo Duma, who is in my daughter's grade, and he's a fantastic kid. So my daughter's already bugging me to go, so it'll be good to go. In terms of I just wanted to give a couple of some information to everybody about two local sports teams that won championships over the weekend, which I thought it was a good thing to recognize them. And I don't know if the third one won because it wasn't updated, so I can't speak to them. But the only team in Russell minor hockey to bring home a GHA championship trophy, a banner, was the midget B team coached by Sean McNally. So congrats to that team. A little jealous because that's the team I coached last year, and we only made it to semifinals. So great job there, Sean and his team, and all the wonderful kids on that team. And the second one is the Russell and District Coyotes Adam C team, which is my daughter's team. This is why I know. They took home the playoff championship trophy yesterday with a 3-1 win over Canada, and they also were awarded the regular season championship as well at the same time. And then there was the Russell District Coyote Bantam B team that were in the finals yesterday. And I couldn't find the result this morning, so did they lose? Oh, okay. Was it to Gloucester? So congratulations to them for being finalists. There were 3 Russell minor hockey teams that made the finals: the novice A, the Adam C, and the midget B. And the midget B was the only team to take home the championships in the GHA banner. So you'll see Madame Guital's group in the summertime, a little bit of work to do to put up the banners. So, and I know there's a lot of tournament wins this year from a lot of the teams that will be representing our municipality in our arenas for years to come. So congratulations to them.
Councillor Associate.
You just reminded me of something. If I could just add, this Friday, the 5th, at the Russell Curling Club, the Team Cochrane is going off to the provincials, so they're having a little send-off to congratulate them and wish them well.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 19, public consultations, hearings, we have none. Item 20, pursuant to a motion to move into closed session at the hour of 9:36 p.m. to address matters pertaining to Section 239 of the Municipal Act 2001, SO 2001, Chapter 25, to consider matters relating to 1. Proposed acquisition land in the industrial park. Under Section 2C, a proposed or pending acquisition of disposition land by the municipality or local board. That's the only one? Oh, okay, perfect. New to move in a seconder. Moved by Conseiller Bisson, seconded by Councillor Tarnowski. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Take 5 minutes.
Yeah.